Hi everyone. Tonight, we step into the fragile stillness of a winter forest. Snow gathers around your boots, and the air is so sharp it burns your lungs with every breath. Bare trees rise around you, thin and rigid under their icy skins. The moon spreads a pale silver glow across a place that feels calm and lethal at the same time. It is beautiful, yes, but without the knowledge carried by native peoples for generations, you would not last until morning. The cold would take you long before dawn. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy what I share here. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Leave it in the comments. It's always interesting to see how far this small community reaches. Now, lower the lights, and let's begin. You move farther into the darkness, hearing the quiet creak of trees bending beneath the weight of ice. Picture yourself alone out here. No synthetic fleece, no modern sleeping bag, just your body, your resolve, and the cutting cold. Anxiety starts to rise as the temperature drops hour by hour. You begin to wonder how anyone could ever sleep peacefully in such a place. Yet Native Americans did, century after century, in regions where the cold routinely fell well below zero. They didn't merely endure. They slept, dreamed, and woke prepared for the next day. The first thing you notice is fire. Always fire. A modest, crackling flame in a clearing becomes the heart of life. Historically, indigenous peoples, from the Great Plains to subarctic regions, used fire not only to cook but as a true hearth, a small sun that formed a zone of safety in an otherwise frozen night. It's well established that some tribes, such as the Cree or Ojibwe, organized entire camps around shared fires so that every family had equal access to warmth. Fire was not a comfort, it was structure. There's also a small detail that might surprise you. Smoke was not merely accepted, it was appreciated. Sleeping in smoky air reduced insects during warmer months. In winter, that same smoke settled into clothing, masks, and bedding, acting as a natural deterrent against pests long before chemical repellents existed. Lying beneath layers of fur, you would actually welcome the sting in your eyes. Without it, insects and disease found their way in. It wasn't pleasant by modern standards, but it worked. As you draw closer to the fire, you realize that warmth alone isn't enough. Heat must be controlled. Too much, and sparks could ignite your bedding. Too little, and your fingers begin to numb. Families handled this through rotation. Who watched the fire? Who gathered wood? Who adjusted the embers? That careful routine kept people alive. Historians still debate whether fire tending was shared equally among family members or handled by individuals skilled in managing flames. The answer likely varied by region, but the discussion itself highlights how essential fire was during cold nights. Now focus on the sounds. Snow hissing as it melts in the fire. Sap popping inside burning logs. The quiet movement of someone rising to add more wood. You shift beneath a robe, the scent of hides blending with smoke, while a soft lullaby from a mother calms nearby children. Beyond the firelight, the wilderness is silent. Inside the circle, the fire pulses like a living thing. You think about how dependent modern life is on matches and lighters. Here, fire came from skill, sparks struck from flint, embers carried in bark containers during travel, or fire drills spun patiently until smoke appeared. Because of that effort, every flame mattered. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. Sleep could never be careless when the cold waited just beyond the light. As you begin to drift off beside the fire, something changes in your thinking. The cold stops feeling like an enemy and becomes part of a pattern. The ache in your fingers, the fog of your breath, the steady glow of embers, these form the rhythm of the night. The fire doesn't eliminate the cold. It teaches you how to exist with it. Your eyes grow heavy, your body curls deeper beneath the skins, and the crackling continues. For now, you are safe, inside a delicate ring of warmth mastered by countless generations. And just before sleep takes you, one final thought flickers. Without that fire, without that knowledge, the night would consume you. But this is only the beginning. Fire is just the first secret. The next lies in how layers of hides could recreate the warmth of a modern sleeping bag. That curiosity lingers even as the flames fade behind your closed eyes. You wake again in the dim glow. The fire still lives, but low and quiet. Embers murmur beneath the veil of ash. Cold has returned, brushing your face like an unwelcome presence, and instinctively you reach for the second line of defense, layers. Not padded jackets or advanced fabrics, but carefully arranged animal skins. Each layer traps air, each fold preserving the small amount of heat your body produces. It's widely documented that indigenous groups across North America used multiple hides stacked together to form what we might now call a prehistoric sleeping bag. Deer, elk, moose, and caribou skins were softened and prepared until flexible, then layered so that seams overlapped rather than aligned. By offsetting those gaps, no cold wind could slip through. Picture yourself sliding into that bundle, pulling one layer over your shoulders, tucking another beneath your knees, until you are wrapped inside a cocoon of fur and leather. Here's another detail that may catch you off guard. These hides were not always fresh-smelling. Without modern cleaning methods, bedding often held earthy, musky scents, part animal, part smoke, part human. Yet those smells weren't offensive to the people who lived with them. On the contrary, they meant safety. To them, the scent of hides signaled shelter, warmth, and survival. You might hesitate at first, but in that frozen wilderness, you would quickly associate those smells with comfort rather than unease. As you pull the fur closer, the physical sensation becomes clear. The outer leather side is smooth and firm, shedding snow the way waxed fabric repels rain. The inner fur presses against your skin, uneven, slightly coarse, but warm. You can feel individual hairs, some rough, some soft, all working to insulate you from the cold air. As you move, you hear the faint whisper of fur rubbing against fur, a sound so old it feels like the voice of survival itself. And then you notice the most important detail of all. Not the hide alone, but the air trapped between layers is the true source of warmth. Those tiny pockets become an unseen quilt, filled by your own body heat. The principle is simple, yet it's the same one used today in down jackets and thermal blankets. The buffalo robes that once covered entire families were more than simple blankets. They were vast, shared coverings that carried warmth across generations. You wake before sunrise, the fire reduced to a dim glow, and frost clinging to the edges of the hides. The air bites at your nose, sharp and dry. Then you notice something remarkable stretched across the family. Massive buffalo robes, thick and wide, covering not one person, but several at once. These were not ordinary blankets. They were carefully crafted tools for survival. Historians largely agree that Plains tribes valued buffalo hides above nearly all other resources. A single robe could extend beyond 6 feet in length, sometimes much longer when taken from a large bull. Each hide was tanned and softened with care, leaving the dense winter fur intact. The result was one of the most effective forms of cold weather protection available. Imagine lying beneath one now, the fur packed thick like a mattress, the leather side firm enough to block wind entirely. It was more than a covering, it created its own environment. There is an interesting detail often mentioned in historical accounts. Some buffalo robes were so heavy that moving beneath them required effort. Early European observers compared the feeling to being held down by the weight of the animal itself. Yet this heaviness was an advantage. The weight trapped warmth, pressed bodies together, and produced a sense of solid security. At first, you might resist the pressure, but soon the density becomes comforting, like the ground itself holding you steady. You can almost sense it, the uneven drape of the robe, its thick edges, the faint smell of smoke mixed with animal musk. It is nothing like a woven quilt. It feels raw, textured, alive. When you run your fingers through the fur, it catches slightly against your skin, coarser than sheep's wool, but far warmer. Beneath its weight, your shivering slows and then stops. Records from the 18th and 19th centuries show that buffalo robes were not only used for sleeping. They were valuable trade items. A single robe could be exchanged for tools, horses, or food with neighboring groups or incoming traders. So when you rest beneath one at night, you are wrapped not only in warmth, but in stored value. Your family may have earned it through a successful hunt or gained it through trade. Either way, It represents survival on multiple levels. Archaeologists still debate whether these robes were meant primarily for individuals or for shared use. Some sources describe people sleeping alone with their own robe, while others show entire families gathered beneath one large hide. The evidence is incomplete, and no single explanation applies everywhere. Still, when you picture the scene, the shared arrangement feels logical. In the wilderness, warmth is rarely a solitary effort. It is shared, passed from body to body, much like fire. There is also a ceremonial aspect to consider. Some robes were painted with scenes of hunts, visions, or spiritual symbols. Imagine falling asleep beneath a hide marked with stories of your ancestors, the images faintly visible in firelight. The warmth protects your body, while the designs reinforce identity and continuity. Each night becomes both a practical act and a quiet connection to heritage. Think about the routine involved. In the evening, the robe would be carefully unrolled, shaken free of frost, then laid out on the ground or layered over other hides. Family members would position themselves beneath it, adjusting edges so no cold air slipped inside. In the morning, once the fire was relit, the robe would be rolled up, tied to a travois, and carried onward. Its ability to be moved made nomadic life possible. It was heavy, yes, but even heavy objects had to travel. Under the robe, the sensory world changes. Heat builds gradually as bodies press together. You hear slow, muffled breathing around you. The fur shifts softly when someone moves. Smoke from the fire lingers, mixed with animal scent. Outside, wind and snow may rage, but inside this shared shelter of hide, the storm feels far away. You are enclosed by weight, warmth, and quiet. There is also a lesser-known practical use. Buffalo robes could serve as emergency sleds. Belongings could be bundled inside and dragged across snow. The same hide that kept you alive at night might carry tools, food, or even children during the day. Every part of it served a purpose. Nothing was wasted. Not all robes were the same. Some were expertly tanned, softened with brain mixtures until flexible and comfortable. Others remained stiff and awkward, less suitable for sleeping. Tanning was often handled by skilled specialists within the tribe, with knowledge passed down carefully. Scholars still debate the details. Was brain tanning universal? Was smoke curing always used? The answers differ by region and era, showing that even something as familiar as a buffalo robe belonged to a complex system of expertise. As you shift beneath the robe, you realize how it shaped social life. 5 or 6 people lying side by side, close not by choice, but by necessity. Children between parents, siblings aligned, elders nearest the fire. Privacy fades, replaced by shared endurance. Each night reinforced the same truth: alone, you froze. Together, you survived. There is also a mental effect. The robe's weight grounds you, making rest deeper and more stable. Modern researchers call this pressure therapy, the same idea behind weighted blankets today. Centuries earlier, indigenous peoples experienced the same calming effect through buffalo hides. Comfort discovered long before it was given a name. As sleep approaches, you think about the cost of that warmth. A buffalo had to be hunted, skinned, and processed. Entire communities worked together to turn raw hide into something life-saving. When colonization and mass buffalo slaughter followed in the 19th century, these robes became scarce, and entire ways of life began to collapse. The world you rest within feels fragile, dependent on the roaming herds of the plains. For now, you are safe. Wrapped in fur thick as bedding, heavy yet breathable, your heat blends with that of others. Together, you create a small source of warmth against the endless winter night. But another lesson waits. Sometimes survival did not mean resisting snow, but using it. Digging into drifts, shaping shelters where frost itself became protection. The buffalo robe still lies across you like a fortress. When you wake, the fire has burned out, smoke drifting into the early sky. Cold returns quickly, sharper than before. You realize hides alone were not always enough. Across northern forests and open plains, Native Americans often turned towards snow rather than away from it. Snow itself became shelter. Digging into deep drifts or building mounded structures with tunnels inside allowed families to create insulated spaces. These shelters did not always resemble the rounded Arctic igloo, but the principle was the same. Snow traps air, blocks wind, and stabilizes temperature. Outside, it might be far below zero. Inside, the space could remain just below freezing, a critical difference when survival depends on degrees. There is another advantage that is often overlooked. Snow shelters reduce noise. Imagine lying inside one, thick white walls around you. The wind outside becomes muted, distant. Children fall asleep more easily. Adults rest without listening for snapping branches. In this way, snow transforms from a threat into a source of calm, turning the storm itself into something close to silence. The experience is physical as well. You enter on your knees, moving through a tight passage, your hands brushing against the cold surface, your breath turning instantly into tiny crystals that faintly sparkle along the inner walls. The ground, quickly covered with branches or hides, feels gentler than bare soil. Above, the rounded ceiling softly reflects light, catching the moon's glow and spreading it into a pale blue haze. At first it feels unsettling, but with time, the light becomes reassuring. Archaeologists have found evidence that some tribes regularly built these shelters during emergencies, especially when hunters were stranded far from their camps. They carved snow pits just large enough for one person, sealed them with brush and hides, and endured nights that would otherwise have been fatal. Researchers still disagree on how often whole families slept in these snow shelters versus using them mainly for short hunting trips. Early explorer accounts describe both situations, though their observations often blend with assumption. Consider the process of building one. First, a snowdrift tall enough to hollow out is chosen. Then an entrance tunnel is carved with a slight upward angle to stop wind from rushing inside. Next, the inner walls are smoothed so melting does not drip, since even one drop of water could turn comfort into misery. Finally, branches or spare clothing are placed beneath the body to insulate against the frozen ground. Once complete, you slip inside with your family. The entrance is sealed with a slab of snow or a hide, and the roar of the storm fades into silence. There is something surprising here. Smoke holes were not always added. In the smallest shelters, fires were impractical, so warmth came only from body heat. Breath froze along the ceiling, forming glittering patterns by morning. In larger shelters, however, small fires could be maintained, carefully controlled so smoke escaped through thin sections of the roof. The idea of fire inside snow seems strange until you understand how well-packed ice reflects heat without immediately melting. You adjust beneath your robe, imagining what it was like to share one of these spaces with others, shoulders touching, knees drawn up, bodies arranged closely like stacked logs. You might hear quiet coughing, murmured voices, or the soft laughter of a child amused by sleeping inside snow itself. Outside, the storm continued, but inside warmth slowly grew, each breath adding to the shared heat. The cultural meaning remains important as well. Oral traditions describe snow shelters as symbols of adaptability, showing that even the harshest environment could be used rather than fought. Sleeping inside the very material that threatened survival served as a reminder of humility. Nature could not be conquered, only understood and worked with. The smell inside would be faint, less smoke and more frost, carrying the clean, mineral scent of frozen air. Crystals formed in hair where moisture escaped. When you stirred awake, the interior shimmered with countless points of light. For a brief moment, it felt like sleeping inside the stars. Early missionaries recorded another curious detail. Children sometimes treated snow shelters as play spaces, running in and out of the tunnels during daylight. What adults viewed as survival could become an adventure for the young. Laughter echoed inside those caves, easing the memory of hardship. From a modern viewpoint, the ingenuity is striking. Survival guides still teach similar techniques today. Dig a trench, shape a snow cave, block the entrance. These methods are direct reflections of indigenous knowledge. They remind us that sleeping bags and tents are not entirely new ideas, but improvements on solutions tested over countless generations. As you stretch inside your imagined snow cave, you notice something unexpected. You are no longer shivering. Your body has adapted. The snow is doing its job. The storm above is reduced to a distant sound. You close your eyes and consider the paradox. Snow, once cursed for its deadly cold, now protects you like a sheltering womb. As sleep comes, one thought remains. Not every night was spent inside snow. Often, survival depended on more familiar materials, branches, bark, and quickly built lean-tos raised to block the wind. That becomes the next lesson as you step back into the forest and watch shelter emerge from the simplest natural resources. You crawl out of the snow cave as early light spreads across the drifts, your breath rising like smoke in the cold air. The world feels exposed again, and the sense of danger returns. Snow alone could not always be relied upon. It might be too shallow, too wet, or absent altogether in certain regions. In those situations, Native Americans depended on another long-standing form of protection. Lean-tos built from brush, bark, and whatever the forest provided. There is little doubt that bark shelters were among the most effective designs in wooded environments. Sheets of birch, elm, or spruce bark could be cut, peeled, and layered to create walls that turned aside icy wind. The framework was simple, poles tied together in a triangular or half-dome shape, then covered with bark panels or stacked branches. Within hours, a solid sleeping space could be built, greatly reducing the cold. The forest gave its outer layer, and in return, it offered protection. One interesting detail stands out. Once dried, bark often curled at the edges. Rather than discarding these pieces, families fitted them carefully into gaps, overlapping and wedging them until the walls resembled scales. The appearance was rough, but the design worked. Drafts struggled to pass through. From inside, the uneven surfaces caught firelight in unusual ways, casting shifting shadows that seemed almost alive. Imagine lying beneath such a wall, watching the movement of orange and black across its ridges, and feeling safer than you did moments before. You hear the shelter forming, poles creaking as they are driven into the ground, branches snapping as they are trimmed, bark scraping softly across snow. Each sound signals progress. A wall, a roof, relief from the cold. When the shelter is complete, you sit inside and notice the immediate change. Wind howls outside, but inside it is muted. The air is steady enough to maintain a fire without constant struggle. Archaeological evidence suggests that in the northeastern woodlands, entire communities sometimes slept in bark longhouses large enough for dozens of people. Smaller lean-tos, however, remained essential for travelers, hunters, and temporary camps. Researchers continue to debate whether these shelters were always meant to be short-term or if they sometimes served as semi-permanent homes during certain seasons. The question remains unresolved, partly because bark structures decay quickly and leave little physical trace. Still, oral histories confirm their importance year after year. Now consider the details of preparing one for sleep. Evergreen boughs are laid thick across the ground. Their sharp, resinous scent fills the air as you kneel to arrange them. Hides are spread on top, softening the pressure of needles beneath. The fire is positioned just outside the opening, close enough that warmth reaches inside while smoke rises and drifts away. Inside, you curl beside another sleeper, the bark wall at your back holding faint warmth it has absorbed. Early observers noted something less pleasant. They often complained about fleas in bedding made from brush and bark. Insects sometimes came along with the evergreen branches, making for uncomfortable company at night. You imagine scratching in the darkness, deciding it is a small price to pay for staying alive. A flea or two was better than freezing. The textures bring comfort. The bark wall feels rough under your hand, peeling in places, solid in others. The ground crackles softly as you shift. Evergreen needles release fresh bursts of scent. Overhead, the shelter creaks gently as wind presses against it, yet it holds, flexible rather than rigid. You close your eyes, soothed by the quiet chorus of creaks and sighs as the structure settles around you. And there was another layer to this practice: ritual. For some tribes, building even a temporary lean-to was more than a basic need. Songs were often sung as the shelter took shape. Quiet chants honored the trees that offered their bark and branches. Sleeping inside was not just about protection from the cold, but about spiritual balance, a reminder of living in harmony with the forest. In this belief system, a lean-to was not simply wood and bark. It represented kinship, a shared place within the same living world. Today, many modern campers attempt to copy this method. They cut branches, layer bark, and spread mats of evergreen needles. Survival guides repeat instructions that indigenous peoples once carried in memory alone. Yet something important is missing. The patience. The rhythm. The passed-down knowledge of which bark peels cleanly, which branch bends without breaking, and which evergreen needles release the most comforting scent as they warm beneath the body. That closeness to the land turned each lean-to into more than a shelter. It became practical craftsmanship shaped by need. Historians also debate another detail. Did families always position the open side toward the fire, or did they change the angle based on shifting winds? Evidence points to flexibility, a quiet awareness of local conditions, with orientation adjusted from night to night. There was no fixed rule, only ongoing negotiation with the weather. Adaptability mattered as much as construction itself. Knowing how to build was essential, but knowing when and how to adjust was even more important. So you imagine yourself lying there, the bark wall supporting your back, the fire's glow warming your face. The night grows colder, but inside you feel sheltered, wrapped in the forest's quiet generosity. It is not comfortable. Fleas, smoke, and tight quarters make that clear. Still, it is sufficient. Enough to last until morning. When light slips through the gaps in the bark, you wake to a world that is still frozen, yet manageable. As sleep deepens, you can almost taste the resin in the air, the sharp bitterness of smoke lingering on your tongue. Outside, snow crunches softly under someone's steps, perhaps a night watcher returning with more firewood. You drift between awareness and rest, reassured by the sense that the forest itself has offered you a blanket. And you understand that lean-tos were not the only clever solution. Beneath you lies another idea, one carved directly into the ground. Pits dug deep, hidden chambers where warmth was held not by bark or snow, but by earth itself. You sense this will be the next stage of the journey. You leave the bark shelter behind, its resinous scent still clinging to you, and step onto ground that feels hard beneath the snow. You stamp your boots and hear the hollow sound of frozen soil. It becomes clear that sometimes warmth was not sought above the surface at all. Instead, indigenous peoples dug downward, creating underground spaces where heat stayed trapped like a stored resource. Archaeological findings show that in many regions, especially the Northwest and parts of the subarctic, families built semi-subterranean homes with impressive insulation. Imagine crossing a winter plain and noticing only a slight rise in the earth, a thin line of smoke, or the edge of a sod-covered roof. Beneath it, a chamber spread out, lined with poles, mats, and animal hides. The ground itself formed the walls, thick and steady, shielding those inside from wind and frost. Here is a detail that often surprises people. Even short-term hunting shelters sometimes use this same idea. A pit only 2 or 3 feet deep could drastically change how heat moved. By stepping downward and curling into the earth, you escaped the extreme temperature shifts above. Modern campers talk about cold air settling in low places, but indigenous pits worked differently. When properly insulated with branches, bark, or hides, the ground enclosed you in still air, preserving every bit of body heat. Creating one of these shelters involved both effort and meaning. Frozen soil was scraped away using bone or antler tools, the earth resisting as it cracked apart. The hollow was then lined with woven reed mats or spruce boughs, releasing a sharp pine scent into the night. Hides were spread over this base, turning bare ground into a sleeping surface. Poles formed a rib-like roof, covered with brush, sod, or additional hides, leaving a small opening for smoke and air. Crawling inside felt like entering the chest of a great living creature, enclosed, protected, breathing alongside you. Researchers still disagree on how these underground shelters were used. Some evidence suggests they served as permanent winter villages, with entire communities living below ground year-round. Other records describe them as seasonal shelters, used in winter and abandoned during warmer months for lighter homes. The reality was likely a mix, shaped by climate, available materials, and tradition. Now imagine settling into one of these earthen rooms. The ground beneath you feels firm but steady, neither icy nor hot. Above, smoke drifts slowly toward the vent, its scent absorbed by the walls until even the soil smells of fire. Shadows flicker across packed earth, making it seem as though the ground itself is alive. You lie back, enclosed, feeling a warmth more constant than any lean-to could provide. Oral histories add a human detail. Children sometimes pressed patterns or finger marks into the walls, turning plain dirt into designs. You can picture small hands dragging across clay, leaving marks that glowed in firelight like early cave drawings. Even in hardship, play endured, leaving quiet signs of life etched into the mud. The sound inside these pits was distinctive. Outside, wind might roar, trees creak, or wolves call. Inside, everything softened. Voices dropped to murmurs. Songs echoed gently. Lullabies lingered long after the last word faded. Falling asleep here meant drifting off not in silence, but in a space that held sound like a drum holding its final beat. It is hard not to think of modern basements, storm shelters, or bunkers. The principle is the same. Earth insulates. But in this indigenous context, it was not about concrete or steel. It was about trust in soil and stone. The land was not only a source of food, but a home, a sheltering force, a partner in survival. There was also a richness of sensation. The smell of damp clay mixed with wood smoke. The faint taste of ash in the mouth as embers smoldered. The rough texture of packed earth beneath the fingertips. Sleeping here was not comfortable. It was smoky, heavy, and gritty, but it was safe. Each breath seemed to stay within the chamber, returning warmth to the body. Some accounts describe underground rooms large enough for dozens of people, entire villages hidden beneath the frost. Picture moving through a tunnel, ducking under beams, and entering a shared space where multiple fires glowed in shallow pits. Families rested on mats around them, ceilings low, walls thick, heat shared. Children slept sprawled out, elders murmured in dreams, hunters shifted as dawn approached. That underground rhythm bound communities together in ways few surface homes could. There were challenges, of course. Ventilation was always a concern. Without proper airflow, smoke could build up, irritating eyes and lungs. Families constantly adjusted vents, balancing warmth and fresh air. Some mornings you might wake coughing, eyes stinging, yet still thankful. Survival was rarely ideal. It was always a careful balance. Even so, compared to the cold above, the pit felt like refuge. As you curl beneath hides in this imagined chamber, you sense the weight of soil overhead, the steady heat of nearby fire, the shared breathing of sleepers around you. Above ground, storms, ice, and danger ruled. Below, there was calm. The earth had hidden you, protected you, and kept you alive. As sleep takes hold, you realize this ingenuity did not stop with pits. Another simple method awaited, one that feels almost magical. Stones heated in fire and placed into bedding, holding warmth long after flames faded. That would be the next lesson. The earth pit slips behind you, its smoky scent faint on your clothes, and you find yourself once again under open sky. Stars scatter overhead like shards of ice. The campfire has burned down to pale ash. You shiver, aware that there is no blazing fire, no heavy robe, no pit to shelter you. Then you notice something nearby. Stones still warm to the touch, gathered earlier by someone who understood this method well. Archaeological evidence shows that indigenous groups across North America regularly used heated stones to stay warm at night. The process was simple and effective. Stones were placed in the fire during the evening to absorb heat, then wrapped in hides, bark, or woven mats and placed into bedding. Nestled near your feet, pressed to your stomach, or tucked beneath layers of fur, these stones released a steady, lasting warmth for hours. In practical terms, they functioned as prehistoric hot water bottles, the early forerunners of every heating pad in use today. Oral traditions note an interesting detail. Many tribes were selective about the stones they chose. Not every rock could withstand fire. River stones, for example, often cracked or even burst when overheated due to trapped moisture. Over time, people learned to identify dense, dry stones from specific locations, committing to memory which outcrops produced the safest material. This understanding of stone, heat, and fire was not random. It was passed down, practiced, and quietly taught from elders to the young, much like a guarded formula. You imagine yourself crouched in the dark, lifting one of these stones. Its surface is coarse, its edges uneven, yet warmth seeps into your hands like a solid ember. You quickly wrap it in a strip of hide before it scorches your skin. Slip it beneath your robe, and the cold begins to retreat from your core. The effect is immediate and physical, like carrying a small, private sun beneath your bedding. Scholars still disagree on whether heated stones were mainly used by hunters sleeping away from camp or whether they became common in larger village settings as well. Physical evidence is limited, as stones leave little trace beyond soot marks. However, early explorer accounts mention the practice often enough to suggest it was widespread, especially in colder regions where fuel for long-lasting fires was limited. Why keep burning wood all night when heat could be stored in stone and brought directly into sleep? Consider the sensory details. The faint smell of scorched hide where the stone rests too long. The soft crackle as bark wrapping dries. The gentle hiss as frost evaporates instantly on contact. At first the heat is uneven and intense, then it settles into a softer, steady glow. You move the stone from place to place, following the last waves of warmth as they slowly fade into the darkness. There is a small detail that often brings a smile. Some people named their favorite stones. A well-shaped rock that held heat reliably could become a companion, carried from camp to camp. You can imagine a grandmother laughing as she scolds a child for misplacing her stone, treating it not as an object, but as a dependable helper in the nightly struggle against the cold. Now picture these heated stones shared among several sleepers. A parent places one at a child's feet, another between two bodies, a third beneath layered hides covering everyone. The warmth spreads unevenly, small pockets of heat forming here and there, but together they make the night survivable. The rhythm of life shifts. You no longer fear the fire dying, because its warmth lingers in these quiet companions kept close. There were risks as well. Stones heated too much could burn skin or damage hides. Some fractured violently, sending sparks into the dark. To reduce danger, families developed careful routines, testing stones before wrapping them, letting them cool briefly in open air, or adding extra layers of cloth. It required balance and attention, even in exhaustion. Survival never offered comfort freely. It always demanded care. The mental reassurance mattered almost as much as the physical heat. Imagine a child holding a warm stone in the dark, feeling less alone because of its steady presence. Even adults may have slept more deeply, comforted by the sense of holding fire itself. That feeling is familiar even today, when you slip beneath a heated blanket and allow your body to finally relax. There is also a spiritual layer to consider. In many indigenous traditions, stones were not seen as lifeless objects but as ancient beings, keepers of memory and strength. To heat a stone and sleep beside it was, in a way, to embrace something sacred. The warmth was more than physical. It was the earth offering a piece of its energy, a reminder that you belong to it, not separate from it. As you curl around your imagined heated stone, the night feels less threatening. Your toes stop aching with frost. Your chest loosens in the cold air. You breathe more deeply, hearing the muffled breaths of others nearby doing the same. A quiet community of sleepers, each with a hidden ember, each wrapped in warmth borrowed from fire and rock. This naturally leads to thoughts of modern camping tools. Chemical heat packs, rechargeable warmers, insulated bottles filled with boiling water, all are reflections of this ancient method. The tools have changed, but the idea is the same. Store heat, release it slowly, endure the night, and, just as importantly, rest well enough to dream. Dreams held meaning. Oral traditions speak of visions experienced near the warmth of stones, messages arriving in the space between wakefulness and cold. Some families believed stones spoke during those moments, offering guidance and shaping dreams. You can almost sense it now, a low hum as sleep deepens, warmth pulsing like a heartbeat, the stone becoming more than mineral, becoming a presence. As your eyes close, you realize that warmth was never only personal. Someone always remained awake to tend the central fire, feeding it while others slept, ensuring more stones could be heated as the night stretched on. That steady vigilance carried entire camps through winter. This leads to the next glimpse: the rotations of families and guards, the constant effort to keep fire alive long after the stars faded. The stone beside you cools gradually, its heat slipping away like the final note of a lullaby. You shift, pulling the hides tighter, and notice the glow of another fire nearby. This flame is not accidental. It is protected, tended, never allowed to die completely. People understood that letting the fire go out meant starting again, a nearly impossible task in extreme cold. So they built systems, rotations, shared duties, steady rhythms, to keep it alive until morning. Early explorer accounts describe camps where families assigned fire watchers by the hour. Each adult took a turn, rising from sleep to stir embers, add wood, or reposition heated stones. In larger settlements, elders often remained near the hearth through the night, partly because they slept more lightly, and partly because their presence reassured the young. Fire was more than flame, it represented continuity. Without it, the night could overwhelm everything. There is another detail that appears occasionally in the records. Children were sometimes allowed to tend the smallest hearths. Under close supervision, a child learned how to judge wood thickness, how to bank embers under ash to make them last, how to coax sparks with a careful breath. Imagine being 7 years old, trusted with the camp's heartbeat. Pride and fear would mix, but the lesson would be clear: survival depended on steady hands. You can almost hear the sounds: the rustle of someone rising from bedding, the soft shuffle of feet across dirt or snow, a stick scraping coals into place. The fire responds with a crackle, then a hiss as new wood catches. Light spreads across faces half hidden by robes, shadows flickering on bark walls or hide ceilings. That glow comforts sleepers who barely wake, reassured that the fire still burns. Researchers continue to debate whether fire duty followed strict schedules or shifted naturally as people woke during the night. Some anthropologists point to oral traditions describing fixed rotations. Others suggest a more flexible approach. If you woke, you tended the fire. The reality likely differed by region. What remains certain is that the fire belonged to everyone. Ignoring it was not an option. There was also a ceremonial side. In some groups, quiet prayers accompanied the feeding of flames, words spoken to remind the fire of its role as a living ally. Tending the hearth became more than a chore. It was a dialogue, a renewed bond with each piece of wood placed upon it. You sense the closeness of that act, not with an object, but with a presence that offered light, warmth, and protection. And yet, beneath it all, the practical truth remained. Fire meant survival. Fire meant defense. Predators were reluctant to approach its glow. Keeping the fire alive through the night helped keep wolves at a distance. Fire also meant food. 2 cuts of meat rested in the embers, slowly cooking, ready by morning for those who woke early. It provided light for treating injuries, warmth for shaping tools, and smoke for drying hides. Fire was the center of the night. Without it, order fell apart. Imagine the communal circle. A dozen sleepers form a ring around the hearth, bodies angled toward the warmth, faces turned to the light. Every hour, someone wakes, not out of preference, but out of need. While this constant watch might sound exhausting, it also offered reassurance. One person could sleep deeply, trusting that another would rise, that someone else would tend the flames. That shared duty created connection. No one faced the cold alone. There's also a curious detail from historical accounts. At times, those keeping watch spoke softly to the fire itself. Early missionaries described elders sitting alone at night, murmuring to the flames, recounting hunts, losses, or dreams. The fire became a listener as much as a guardian. Picture yourself wrapped in hides, drifting toward sleep while a low voice carries across the firelight, an elder confiding not in people, but in the blaze. It feels unexpectedly soothing. The sensory details linger. The scent of half-burned wood, sharp and resinous. The sudden spray of sparks when damp wood catches. Heat that spreads unevenly, burning your face when you lean in, chilling your back when you turn away. The steady glow moves across fur and skin, casting gold and shadow across the night. Even the rhythm of smoke, sometimes light, sometimes choking, becomes part of the soundtrack of survival. Modern campers still recognize parts of this instinct. Sit by a fire long enough and you naturally tend it, nudging logs, stirring embers, blowing gently on coals. That behavior, passed down over generations, links you to those who depended on fire not for comfort, but for life itself. You repeat the same motions, even if your stakes are lower. At its core, fire rotation wasn't only about maintaining flames. It was about trust. Giving someone the responsibility of guarding the fire was a way of saying, "I trust you to keep us alive." In a world where failure or betrayal could mean death, that trust was stronger than stone. You pull your robe tighter, warmed by the knowledge that as you sleep, someone else keeps watch. The fire hums quietly, its glow like a heartbeat in the darkness. You close your eyes, comforted by the certainty that warmth will still be there when you wake. And as sleep takes hold, you sense the next lesson approaching. Sometimes, fire alone was not enough, and human bodies became the true blankets, pressed together to share heat. That lesson belongs to the next night, when survival depended not on flame, but on closeness. The fire burns low now, its light steady but thin, and you shift beneath your hides. The warmth lingers, but faintly, and you understand what elders already knew. Fire has limits. Heat escapes into the night no matter how carefully the flames are fed. That's when people relied on something more reliable, each other. Early observers noted that many native communities practiced group sleeping not only for comfort, but for survival. Bodies pressed together generated warmth no fire could fully replace. Skin doesn't just retain heat, it gives it off. You imagine curling beside family members, shoulders touching, limbs overlapping, every heartbeat adding to a shared cocoon of warmth. Oral traditions add an important detail. The placement of sleepers mattered. Children were tucked between adults, sometimes layered 2 or 3 deep, so their smaller bodies stayed warm at the center. Elders often lay along the outer edges, shielding the young from drafts creeping through gaps in the hides. It was both practical and symbolic, the old protecting the new. Generations encircled one another like rings in a tree. The sensation is vivid. You shift against another body, their warmth lingering from the fire, their robe overlapping yours. Someone's arm rests across you, heavy yet reassuring. You hear steady breathing, an occasional murmur from dreams. At first, the closeness might feel uncomfortable to modern minds that value personal space. But here, privacy gives way to necessity. Alone you freeze. Together, you survive. Scholars still debate how structured these arrangements were. Some believe families followed clear patterns, elders on the outside, mothers and infants in the center, older children grouped nearby. Others think the system was flexible, changing with conditions. Whoever felt the cold most sought the warmest place. Regardless of the details, the result was the same. The camp survived even the harshest months. There's an anecdote from early traders that offers a revealing contrast. Some described feeling overwhelmed when invited to sleep among native hosts, unused to such closeness. Accustomed to individual beds, they found the press of bodies suffocating. Yet by morning, many admitted they had never slept warmer during winter. You can almost imagine one complaining through the night, only to confess later, somewhat embarrassed, that it was the best rest they'd had in weeks. The nighttime soundscape is intimate. Not just the crackle of fire, but the chorus of human sounds, snores rising and falling, sighs slipping out during half-sleep, quiet words spoken in dreams. Breath fills the air, turning it damp, fogging hides and walls. In extreme cold, it even frosts. It isn't elegant, but it's alive. Each exhale strengthens the shelter, pushing back against the cold. Modern science explains this as thermal regulation through shared body heat. Infants, especially, regulate temperature better when held close, their breathing syncing with the caregivers. Indigenous peoples didn't need scientific terms to understand this. They felt it, relied on it, lived by it. Babies survived because they were never left alone in the cold. Hunters survived by sleeping back to back beneath hides after long days. Instinct hardened into tradition. The emotional comfort mattered as well. Falling asleep surrounded by kin brought security beyond warmth. Predators might circle, storms might rage, but within that ring of bodies, you belonged to something resilient. Cold pressed in from every side, but unity pushed back harder. Among some tribes, this sharing of warmth carried spiritual meaning. Heat was viewed as a gift, never hoarded, always shared. The fire gave warmth to people, and people passed it to one another. To sleep apart, keeping warmth for yourself, was seen as selfish, even risky. Survival depended on collective care. Now imagine the tactile reality of such a night. Fur brushing fur. Hair against your cheek. The twitch of a cousin's foot against yours. A child stirs, kicking lightly, and the group shifts with soft grumbles before settling again. In the low firelight, the scene is crowded, imperfect, and deeply human. There were challenges, of course. Space was tight. Disagreements arose over the warmest spots. A restless sleeper could disturb everyone. But these discomforts reinforced a simple truth. Survival required compromise. Minor annoyances were worth enduring when the alternative was frostbite or death. Modern parallels are easy to find. Hikers caught in blizzards huddle together to avoid hypothermia. Soldiers in frozen trenches cluster for warmth. Even today, a dog curling beside its owner on a cold night signals safety. These moments echo lessons indigenous peoples learned long ago. Warmth is shared. As you drift in this imagined sleep, you notice the calm it brings. Another person's warmth means presence, reassurance that you are not abandoned in the vast cold. Fear softens. Thoughts quiet. Dreams become gentler. Some oral stories even describe winter nights filled with shared dreams, visions flowing from sleeper to sleeper, as if closeness allowed spirits to move freely. You may doubt that, but lying here, pressed among others, it almost feels possible. When dawn finally arrives, the group stirs slowly. Cold rushes in as hides are lifted and bodies separate. You feel a brief ache at the loss of warmth, the sudden loneliness of standing apart. It's a reminder that survival was never meant to be solitary. It was always communal, fire, hides, bodies, and spirit layered together. Each held part of the answer, but only together did they endure the night. Breathing in the sharp morning air, you sense that another strategy lay beyond fire and closeness. Movement itself was protection. Migration, shifting camps, following warmth through seasons. That lesson carries forward, showing how even walking became a defense against freezing. Morning light glints across the snow, pale and cold. You rise from the circle of sleepers, shaking stiffness from your limbs, and recognize a deeper truth. No matter how well fires were tended, hides layered, or bodies gathered, sometimes survival meant not staying put. It meant moving. Tribal memory preserves this clearly. Many native peoples lived by seasonal migration, relocating camps as weather changed. Entire communities followed animal herds, fish runs, or milder climates. On the Great Plains, groups traveled south to escape the worst blizzards. In the Northwest, families moved from high elevations into valleys where snow was lighter. Mobility itself became insulation. Why endure the harshest side of winter when you could stay ahead of it? It may surprise you to learn that movement during cold seasons was never random. Paths shaped by generations of use were as familiar to these communities as modern streets are to people today. Families remembered precise chains of valleys, rivers, and protective hills, passing that knowledge down like a map etched into memory, even without compasses or GPS. They traveled confidently using stars, waterways, and the angles of mountains. Migration for them was not wandering without purpose. It was a carefully refined system of survival, tested and improved over many generations. The sensory experience of such journeys was vivid. Picture snow crunching beneath each step, producing that sharp squeak heard only in extreme cold. Horses exhale clouds of steam. Dogs bark as they pull travois stacked with hides. Children, bundled tightly on sleds, laugh or complain as they ride. Above them, ravens call through the brittle air, their dark wings flashing against the pale winter sun. The scent of smoke lingers behind as campfires are put out, leaving thin wisps rising from darkened rings in the snow. Researchers still debate how far these seasonal movements extended. Some believe groups traveled only short distances within fixed territories. Others argue that nations such as the Comanche or Lakota ranged widely, adjusting routes each year based on weather and food availability. Archaeological evidence, stone teepee rings, charred hearths, broken tools, supports both views. The discussion itself highlights the complexity of these migrations, far removed from the stereotype of aimless travel. Migration also served purposes beyond escaping cold. It helped maintain balance with resources. Remaining too long in one place depleted firewood, drove away game, and exhausted fishing areas. By moving on, families allowed the land time to recover so it could provide again. Survival, then, was not only about staying warm tonight, but about ensuring warmth many winters into the future. You feel this truth in the body. Legs ache from miles of walking through snow. Wind bites at exposed skin. Lungs burn steadily while climbing ridges. Yet movement itself creates warmth. Blood flows faster, muscles generate heat, and even in freezing air, sweat dampens clothing. Walking becomes its own heating system. Rest too long, and freezing becomes a real risk. Keep moving and the body turns into a furnace. Oral histories add a lighter detail. For some children, migrations felt like adventures. They raced ahead on known paths, slid down snowy banks, or treated the travois like sleds. What felt like hardship to adults sometimes became play for the young. Their laughter echoed across frozen valleys, mixing with the grunts of horses or oxen pulling heavy loads. When camps were rebuilt at night, migration knowledge shaped shelter placement as well. People remembered which tree stands blocked northern winds, which slopes caught early sunlight, and which rivers offered both water and solid crossings. This was not chance. It reflected a deep, long-term relationship with the land and its patterns. Choosing the right spot could mean the difference between a tolerable night and frostbitten hands. Migration also strengthened community bonds. Moving together required cooperation. No single family could stop without affecting everyone. Elders set the pace. Hunters ranged ahead. Women organized food and tools. Children learned responsibility by carrying small loads. It was a coordinated system of survival, repeated season after season. You sense its rhythm physically. Step after step, breath after breath, the steady crunch beneath moccasins or boots. The repetition becomes calming, almost meditative, as if walking itself pushes back against the cold. When camp finally rises again, relief is immediate. Fires are lit, hides unrolled, food shared, warmth restored. You fall asleep knowing the journey will continue tomorrow. But for now, you have stayed ahead of winter's worst. Modern life still reflects this strategy. Some people travel south to escape winter. Others shift routines, closing summer homes, moving into cities, or flying toward warmer coasts. The idea remains unchanged. Why endure cold if you can relocate? Only the tools have changed. Planes replace moccasins, highways replace forest trails. The mental comfort of migration mattered just as much. Imagine lying down in a newly built camp, confident it was chosen wisely. Wind shakes branches above, but the shelter faces south and hills block the worst gusts. Fire burns steadily because wood is plentiful. Bedding feels heavier with the knowledge that food and water are close. Sleep comes easier when movement has carried you away from danger. But how did they know when to leave or stay? Often, the land provided signals, animal movements, early storms, star patterns, even subtle changes in bird calls. Ignoring these signs risked hunger, frost, or worse. So as you curl beneath hides at night, footsteps still echoing in memory, you grasp another layer of indigenous knowledge. Warmth was not always found by staying put. Sometimes it lay ahead, something reached by moving in harmony with the seasons. Soon, you notice another lesson unfolding. Even plants, grasses, reeds, cattails, could become insulation as effective as animal hides. Nature offered warmth everywhere, not only through animals and trees, but through overlooked fibers and fluff. You wake to the creak of frozen branches and distant crows, the land still wrapped in white. The camp pauses for several days, giving people and animals rest. Inside shelters, you observe new details, layers of woven plant fibers, soft against an otherwise severe environment. Survival depended not only on hides and fire, but on using simple materials wisely. Archaeology and oral tradition both show that plant materials, grasses, cattail fluff, bulrushes, shredded bark, were common winter tools. Picture thick reed mats spread beneath hides to block the frozen ground, or bundles of cattail fluff forming pillow-like supports that made you forget, briefly, the ice below. These fibers were not filler. They provided insulation comparable to skins and were often lighter and easier to transport. Cattail fluff sometimes filled clothing much like modern down. Children especially benefited, waddling in garments puffed with plant fibers that trapped warm air. What might seem like an improvised trick today was simply standard winter practice then. The texture was distinctive. Pressing a hand into a cattail mat, you feel the springy resistance and hear dried fibers shift softly. Rest your head on a bundle of fluff and it cradles gently, though bits cling to hair and skin. A faint earthy scent rises, sweet and reminiscent of summer marshes, even in deep winter. Scholars still debate how central plant insulation was. Some see it as a backup when hides were scarce. Others note its presence across many regions, suggesting it was a core survival method. Because plant fibers decay quickly, physical evidence is limited, but the consistency of oral accounts points to a far greater importance than once assumed. Preparation followed seasonal rhythms. In late summer, families gathered reeds and grasses, drying and storing them for winter. Cattails were stripped and fluffed, their seeds drifting like snow. Bark was pounded into fibers and woven into mats. Children often helped, their small hands well suited to stuffing fibers into gaps. The work was repetitive, but without it, winter nights were unbearable. Cattail fluff also served as tinder. It caught sparks easily, making fire starting simpler in damp conditions. The same material that softened bedding could also ignite the fire that warmed the camp. Lying down at night, you knew that the softness beneath your head could help prevent a cold morning without flames. The sounds inside a fiber-lined shelter were subtle. Each movement produced a gentle rustle, like wind through dry grass. These quiet sounds blended with popping firewood and steady breathing, forming a simple lullaby that eased sleep. Psychological comfort mattered too. Plant scents carried memories of warmer seasons, lakes, forests, abundance. They reminded sleepers that the land was not only severe, but generous and cyclical. Even in winter, plants whispered of return. Vegetation served many roles beyond bedding. Reed mats became walls. Cattails sealed gaps against drafts. Bark screens reflected heat inward. Every plant part had potential if you understood its use. Survival depended less on force and more on creativity and attention. Challenges existed. Fibers absorbed moisture easily and needed drying. Bedding required frequent replacement. Insects sometimes hid in stored bundles. Still, these issues were minor compared to the pain of sleeping on frozen ground. Modern insulation follows the same principles. Down jackets, wool, and synthetic fills all trap air to reduce heat loss. Even today's pillows trace their logic back to cattails, reeds, and bark. Technology refined the idea. But the inside itself is deeply indigenous. You close your eyes, imagining yourself on a bed of reeds, head resting on cattail fluff wrapped in hides. Firelight plays across mat walls. The air carries a faint sweetness, a memory of marshes sealed inside the shelter. The night feels gentler, as if nature has offered not just warmth, but care. And you sense the next lesson approaching. Before sleep came rituals of heat and cleansing. Sweat lodges, steaming enclosures, were not only spiritual spaces, but practical preparation for winter nights. Stepping from intense warmth into cold seemed paradoxical, yet it held a hidden advantage. The night feels endless, stars fixed in place, cold pressing into bone despite thick hides and shared warmth. Then you remember something different, not fur, bark, or fiber, but a heated, steamy space where bodies gathered before rest. The sweat lodge. To outsiders, it may appear purely ceremonial. In practice, it also filled the body with stored heat that carried through bitter nights. Records show that sweat lodges across North America were small domed frames of willow or saplings, covered with hides, mats, or earth. Hot stones rested in a central pit. Water poured over them produced dense steam. Imagine entering after a day of cutting cold, the sudden wave of heat wrapping around you, preparing body and spirit alike for the night ahead. Your skin tingles as sweat forms almost at once. For a time, the world beyond the walls fades away. You sit in heat so strong it feels unreal that ice and frost wait just outside. One small detail adds warmth to the scene. Many people sang inside these lodges. Their voices bounced off the low ceiling, mixing with the hiss of steam and the pop of hot stones. Laughter blended with chants, and the air grew thick with moisture. This was not only a test of endurance. It was social, shared, and at times lighthearted. Children took part too, laughing as steam blurred their sight, amazed that a shelter smaller than a teepee could feel like midsummer. Your senses fill quickly. The sharp bite of steam enters your nose, carrying earthy hints of willow frames and animal hides. Heat presses against your skin, tightening it, then easing your muscles. Beads of sweat run down your back and soak into the mats below. In that moment, you are not cold at all. You glow, your body holding warmth so deeply that the return of winter seems impossible. Scholars still disagree about whether sweat lodges were mainly practical or spiritual. Some believe they were first and foremost sacred spaces, with heat playing a secondary role. Others point to oral histories that describe them as preparation for winter rest, warming the body fully, then stepping into the cold while still radiating heat, like a live coal. Both views may be correct. Ceremony and survival were tightly linked. To pull them apart misses the reality that, for those who lived this way, body and spirit were never separate. Now imagine the shift. You step out of the steaming lodge. Your skin is slick, your hair damp, your breath turning to white clouds. The cold strikes hard, sharp enough to sting. Yet instead of shaking, you feel steady. Your core still burns with stored heat. Wrapped quickly in robes, you lie near the fire, hides drawn over you, and sleep arrives far faster than it would have otherwise. It feels as if you carried part of the lodge into yourself. Some accounts describe a practice that seems strange today. After sweating, people sometimes rolled briefly in snow. To modern minds it sounds harsh, but the shock closed pores, dried sweat, and refreshed the body. Children laughed, adults shouted in surprise, and then everyone hurried back into warmth. What sounds like punishment was often play, a lesson that cold itself was not an enemy, but part of a larger balance. The lodge also left its scent behind. Smoke from sage, cedar, or sweetgrass often burned inside. When you curl beneath your bedding later, those smells still cling to your skin, mixing with hides and fire. Sleep comes on a memory of steam, the cold outside softened by the deep heat within. And the benefits went beyond warmth. Sweat lodges strengthened breathing, cleaned skin, and relaxed muscles strained from hunting or gathering wood. A body rested better after being cleared this way. Tension eased. So as you drift off, your thoughts quiet and your limbs heavy with gentle fatigue, you understand that warmth was not simply borrowed from fire or furs. It was built inside you, tended like a second flame beneath the skin. Modern parallels remain. Scandinavian saunas, Turkish steam baths, and hot springs around the world all reflect the same idea. People seek heat together, not only to survive, but to feel whole. In each case, the warmth stays with you after you step back into the cold, helping you move through it with ease. Indigenous sweat lodges were not odd or exotic. They were one expression of a worldwide language of warmth, shaped by local knowledge. There is also a small, thoughtful idea found in some oral traditions. Ancestors were said to sit in the lodge as well, joining the songs, their unseen presence adding to the chorus. You imagine closing your eyes, sweat running down your face, and feeling an unseen hand rest briefly on your shoulder. Comfort, shared presence, connection, real or symbolic, deepen the sense of shelter. So when you stretch out after leaving the lodge, hides pulled close, your skin still alive with heat, a calm settles over you. Winter remains outside, the air still dangerous, but you are strengthened from within. And before sleep fully takes you, another lesson waits. Tools shaped from bone and antler, objects that made shelter and survival possible when wood or stone alone were not enough. The skill of shaping nature with nature itself. That comes next. You wake in the quiet coolness after the sweat lodge. Your body still holds a trace of warmth. Around the camp, there is soft, steady work. People are not only resting, they are making. Bone and antler tools tap gently as hands carve, scrape, and bore. Survival here depended not just on shelter, but on creating the tools that made shelter possible. Without steel, iron, nails, or axes, people turned to what was close at hand. The bones of hunted animals and the antlers shed by deer, elk, or moose. Archaeology supports this. Bone points, antler wedges, and sharpened shoulder blades rank among the earliest and most dependable building tools. Picture someone peeling bark with a rib sharpened to an edge, or driving an antler wedge into frozen soil to loosen ground for a pit shelter. These were not rough stopgaps. They were carefully shaped, made with skill equal to any metalworker's craft. One detail stands out. Some antler tools were left partly rough on purpose. The texture improved grip, especially in winter when smooth surfaces slipped in cold hands. You can almost see a hunter smiling at the thought that a polished tool might look fine but risk numb fingers in deep frost. Function always mattered more than appearance. The physical sense is easy to imagine. Your hand closes around a heavy moose antler, its surface ridged and oddly warm despite the air. The weight feels right, the tip shaped by repeated use. When you press it into frozen ground, the impact sends a jolt up your arm. Slowly, soil and ice break apart. Each strike means survival. Another patch of earth opened, another step toward shelter. Researchers still debate how much bone and antler replaced stone. Some argue stone blades stay dominant, with bone used only when needed. Others point to wear patterns that suggest bone tools were everyday essentials, easier to sharpen, lighter to carry, and more flexible in use. As often, the answer likely varies. Different places favored different solutions. What is certain is that bone and antler were never treated as waste. When an animal gave its body, its skeleton also entered the cycle of living. The sounds of tool-making fade into a steady rhythm as you rest. The scrape of sinew against bone. The dull thud of antler wedges driving poles into frozen soil. The soft crackle of bark being stripped away. These were the quiet sounds of preparation, the rhythms that meant nights spent warm instead of shivering beneath open skies. There was also a lighter side. Children carved small copies of tools, learning by watching elders. Some of these have been found at archaeological sites. Tiny awls and scrapers, too fragile for real work, but perfect for practice. Picture a child proudly holding up a crooked bone needle, smiling wide when an elder nods. Even play carried purpose, because one day that skill would keep others alive. Spiritual meaning was present too. In some beliefs, antlers stood for strength, renewal, and connection to animals. Using antler tools was not only useful but respectful. It honored the creature that provided both food and equipment. Each cut or strike carried quiet thanks, an understanding that survival was shared. Modern comparisons are easy to find. Think of today's lightweight plastic or aluminum tools replacing heavier steel in certain uses. The idea is the same. Choose what works best. Bone and antler were the lightweight gear of their time, refined over countless generations. As you settle again, the feel of these tools lingers in your mind. The ridges press into your palm. The smell of freshly worked bone hangs sharp and faintly sweet. You imagine hunters returning from the day's work, hands worn but satisfied, tools ready for tomorrow. The cold remains harsh, but ingenuity matches it step for step. One image stays with you. An elder sharpening a ribbed blade by the fire, humming softly, while a child nearby pretends to cut the air with a toy version. Around them, the camp grows quiet. The fire steadies. Smoke and hide scents fill the shelter. In that moment, tool and toy, ritual and work, blend together. Everything supports life, and life supports everything. As your eyes close, you sense bone and antler tools resting close by, silent watchers through the night. You understand that survival depended not only on physical warmth, but on shared bonds, even with animals. That idea deepens in the next lesson, when you learn how dogs became companions not just in hunting, but in enduring the coldest nights. The faint glow of embers slows your breathing, but this night feels colder than most. The hides are thick, the bark walls strong, yet frost still finds its way in. You shift and pull your robe tighter, when suddenly a different warmth appears. It is alive, steady, breathing beside you. A dog curls against your hip, its body giving off constant heat, its fur dense and earthy. You realize you are not facing the night alone. Historical accounts show clearly that dogs were central companions in many Native American societies, long before horses reached the plains. They pulled loads on travois, guarded camps, and most importantly here, shared warmth on bitter nights. Early explorers often noted that families treated dogs as workers and sleeping partners, drawing them close in winter to keep the cold away. The bond was not only emotional, it was deeply practical. Some reports add a detail that brings a smile. Children sometimes piled onto dogs like living pillows. Imagine a group of siblings asleep in a heap, arms draped over a large, husky-like animal, the dog enduring it with calm patience. The children stayed warm, and the dog enjoyed the closeness of its pack. Even now, it's easy to imagine how that fur would feel against frozen feet. The sensation forms clearly. Your hand sinks into thick fur, rough on the surface, softer beneath. A light smell of smoke and earth rises with the heat. The dog shifts, sighs, and settles again, its body humming with quiet breaths. This warmth is different from hides or stones. It moves, responds, and lives. It is companionship as much as protection. Scholars still debate how common this practice was. Some evidence suggests dogs mainly slept with children, offering warmth and safety. Others believe adults relied on them too, especially hunters away from camp. The details likely changed from place to place. What remains clear is that every being had purpose. Dogs hunted, hauled, warned of danger, and then served as living blankets when night fell. Dogs were not passive sources of heat. They chose where to lie. A clever animal warmed itself near the fire, then pressed close to a person, carrying that heat along. In groups, dogs and people piled together, their combined warmth raising the shelter's temperature. You imagine falling asleep to the muffled sound of many dogs breathing, their presence turning a simple shelter into something that felt like home. There is an odd note in early records as well. Fur traders often complained about the smell of camps filled with dogs, calling it overwhelming. What they described as unpleasant was simply the scent of life and survival at work. To indigenous families, the smell of a dog signaled warmth, alertness, and loyalty. It was the scent of survival carried through winter. Nighttime had its own recognizable soundscape. Beyond the crackle of the fire and human breathing, dogs whimpered softly in their sleep, paws twitching as if running after unseen shapes. At times, a low growl rolled through the darkness when wolves called from beyond the camp, a reminder that these animals were more than sources of heat. They were protectors. Falling asleep with a dog pressed close, you understood that danger outside would not go unnoticed. Dogs also held spiritual meaning. In many traditions, they were seen as guides to the afterlife, guardians standing between worlds. Sleeping beside one was not only about comfort, but about safeguarding the spirit. Their warmth went beyond the physical. It offered reassurance that even in dreams, you were not alone. The modern parallel is clear. Millions of people still share their beds with dogs, no longer out of survival, but affection. Even now, many wake on winter mornings with cold feet warmed by a loyal animal curled nearby. That ancient exchange, heat for companionship, has barely changed. The emotional comfort remains vivid as you picture lying in a crowded shelter. Children stifle laughter before sleep, arms wrapped around a dog. Elders rest quietly, listening to the chorus of canine snores and soft yips. Hunters sleep more soundly knowing their companions will warn them if danger approaches. The warmth is not only thermal. It is emotional and communal, woven into daily camp life. Of course, not every night passed without disruption. Dogs sometimes argued over space or barked suddenly at shadows, breaking sleep. Fleas and ticks moved easily between fur and people. Still, these discomforts were accepted, because without dogs, nights would have been harsher, colder, and more isolating. Survival was never about perfection. It was about partnership. In your mind, you reach out and rest a hand on the dog curled beside you. Its winter-thick fur rises and falls with steady breathing. Its ears twitch as it dreams. Your own breath begins to match its rhythm. A quiet comfort slows your pulse and relaxes your body. Wrapped in hides, pressed close to family and animal, you sense how deeply connected life was here. Humans did not endure winter alone. They survived by tying their lives to the animals beside them. As sleep draws closer, another image emerges. Beyond the ring of sleepers, the cold night is not fully silent. Someone else is awake, moving slowly, eyes scanning the forest under moonlight. No spark is allowed to fade. No threat is ignored. This is the quiet work of night watch. The dog shifts against your hip, ears flicking, then releases a low growl that fades away. You open your eyes and, beyond the fire's glow, notice a figure walking steadily through the moonlight. It is not a wolf or a spirit. It is one of your own, deliberately pacing, ensuring the camp does not slip too deeply into rest. Not everyone slept through the night. Some rose silently, walking the perimeter, feeding the fire, and listening for changes in the dark. These were the moonlit patrols, the unseen labor that kept families alive. Historical accounts are clear that in many native encampments, someone always remained awake. This went beyond tending flames. It was about constant awareness. Wolves lingered nearby. Bears sometimes stirred from hibernation. Enemies could approach unseen. To surrender completely to sleep invited danger, so vigilance became part of winter's rhythm. Slow circuits, careful listening, and the knowledge that the camp was never fully unguarded. There is a detail that feels both practical and reflective. Watchers often measured their patrols by the moon. Its waxing or waning light shaped visibility, defined shadows, and determined the length of each round. Without clocks, the sky set the schedule. Picture stepping into sharp night air, snow crunching beneath moccasins. You glance upward, judging time not by numbers, but by the moon's position drifting across the sky. The sensory experience is intense. Once you leave shared warmth, the cold bites deeper. Your breath clouds white against your hood. The snow squeaks underfoot, the sound traveling far in the stillness. From within the camp come muffled snores, the soft crackle of fire, and the occasional whine of a dreaming dog. But at the perimeter, it is only you and the vast winter night. Scholars still debate how organized these patrols were. Some evidence points to structured rotations, with each adult assigned a portion of the night. Other descriptions suggest looser systems, where lighter sleepers rose naturally, watched for a time, then returned to rest. The method may have shifted with season, threat, or community. What remained constant was that someone always bore the weight of wakefulness so others could sleep safely. You can almost follow the thoughts of the watcher as he walks. He checks the sparks rising from the fire, ensuring none drift toward bark walls. He listens for wolves, gauging their distance. He studies the stars, noting changes that might signal weather shifts. Then he returns to the fire, kneels, stirs the coals, and sets a log carefully in place, watching it catch. Smoke clings to his hands. Cold stings his face. Still, he feels a quiet sense of purpose. The camp is secure. At times, watchers spoke softly to themselves, to the fire, or to the spirits they believed were near. One missionary recorded hearing a man whisper prayers into the night, thanking the moon for light, asking trees to protect children, promising to tend the fire faithfully. For him, patrol was not a burden. It was a sacred responsibility, a dialogue with the living world. You imagine your own breath shaping words in the cold, prayers lifting toward the stars. There is also a lighter side. Young men sometimes treated patrol as a chance to prove courage. They ventured farther than necessary, testing themselves against fear. Elders often disapproved, but such impulses were timeless. Perhaps one returned later with flushed cheeks, claiming to have chased away a shadow. True or not, the tale warmed the camp with laughter come morning. The physical details of patrol are unmistakable. Moccasins compress the snow, leaving clean impressions soon erased by wind. Frost forms along the edges of your cloak, making it crackle softly. Your hands ache as you grip a stick, ready to shift embers or deter an animal. Every sense sharpens. An owl's call, branches rustling, firelight glinting off ice crystals. Sleep pulls at you, but duty holds you awake. Modern parallels are easy to see. Soldiers stand watch in shifts. Parents remain awake while children sleep. Guards patrol empty buildings at night. The principle is unchanged. One stays alert so many can rest. In the wilderness, however, the cost of failure was absolute. A single mistake could mean frozen bodies or lost supplies. To patrol was to shoulder life itself. The mental weight mattered as much as the cold. Knowing you are the thin barrier between rest and disaster sharpens awareness and strengthens belonging. You walk not just for yourself, but for the entire circle: children, elders, hunters, dogs, and fire. Each step is responsibility made real. Yet there is another side to it. The quiet, the moonlight, the steady rhythm of breath and movement can draw the watcher into a reflective state. Many later recalled moments of wonder: auroras shimmering overhead, wolves howling from distant hills, snow falling so softly it seemed sacred. To patrol was to witness the night's beauty in ways sleepers never could. As dawn approaches, the watcher kneels again at the fire, coaxing the flames higher for morning. He slips back beneath his robe, body cold, spirit settled, knowing he has done his part. Another will rise tomorrow, and another after that, as long as the camp remains. As you drift back towards sleep, warmed again by hides and fire, you sense the next lesson forming. The focus shifts from bark or snow shelters to portable homes, ingenious structures that balanced warmth with movement, allowing whole nations to follow the buffalo without freezing at night. The patrol dissolves into shadow as dawn paints the horizon pale blue. You sit up, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and notice the shapes of homes scattered across the snowy plain. Tall, graceful forms rise like inverted cones, hides pulled smooth, poles reaching upward as if speaking to the sky. These are teepees, and they are more than shelters. They represent warmth made mobile, an architectural solution that allowed freedom without exposure. Historical records leave little doubt. The teepee was among the most efficient cold climate dwellings ever created. Long poles, often 12 to 20, were bound at the top and spread in a circle to form a strong frame. Heavy buffalo hides were draped and secured over them, creating a durable outer skin. At the center, a fire burned, its smoke guided upward through adjustable flaps at the peak. Imagine stepping inside. The cold clings to you for a moment, then fades as warmth surrounds your body. Firelight dances across curved hide walls. One striking feature is that teepees breathed. Unlike rigid houses, they adapted to weather. In summer, flaps opened for airflow. In winter, they closed tightly, sometimes layered with extra hides for insulation. Slanted walls deflected wind, and the circular layout prevented drafts from lingering. It was a dwelling designed to move with nature rather than resist it. Inside, the sensory world is rich. Your hand meets the soft, slightly oily surface of buffalo hide, faintly smoky from long use. The poles feel smooth, worn by years of assembly and travel. Beneath you, layers of reeds or hides cushion the frozen ground. The air carries the scent of smoke, fur, and cooked meat, strong, yet comforting. Scholars still discuss where the teepee design originated. Some suggest it spread outward from the northern plains, while others believe similar forms developed independently across regions. The debate itself highlights how practical and effective the design was: light enough to move, strong enough to withstand storms. By the 18th century, the teepee had become a clear symbol of mobility and endurance. Picture a long winter night inside one. A small fire burns steadily at the center, warming the circular space without overwhelming it. Children sit nearest the flames, while adults rest around the edges. Smoke drifts upward toward the opening. You lean back against a robe, listening to the fire and the quiet exchange of voices. Outside, snow falls soundlessly, piling against the base and sealing the shelter more tightly. Inside, the world feels contained and safe. One detail often surprises modern readers. Families marked their teepees with personal symbols painted on the hides. Some showed visions, dreams, or important hunts. Others featured animals or star patterns. Though the shape was shared, no two teepees were identical. Imagine drifting to sleep beneath painted buffalo or constellations, firelight making them shift and flicker. The shelter was not only functional. It carried story, identity, and memory. Even the act of setting one up reflected practiced efficiency, a ritual refined over generations. Women who traditionally managed construction could raise a complete teepee in under an hour. Poles were leaned, secured, spread outward, and covered in a steady rhythm learned from early childhood. Children assisted by holding ropes or bringing smaller hides. Watching the process felt like witnessing a family build a home, not with nails or lumber, but with practiced skill and inherited knowledge. Even today, modern designers admire the teepee's aerodynamic strength. Its cone shape guides wind around it rather than fighting it, and the angled poles allow smoke to escape without letting excessive cold enter. People may now spend thousands on advanced tents and ventilation systems, yet few achieve the same balance of mobility and comfort as this centuries-old design. Inside, the soundscape is calming, the soft hiss of snow melting on the hides, the gentle creak of poles shifting under wind pressure. At the center, a fire crackles, filling the space with warmth. Voices fade as sleepers curl beneath robes. A baby whimpers briefly, quieted by a mother's low hum. Outside, the wind howls, but within, the atmosphere remains calm. Emotionally, the teepee offered more than heat. It provided dignity. Families could carry their homes across the plains, raise them wherever buffalo traveled, and never feel displaced. Sleeping inside meant finding steadiness in movement and comfort amid uncertainty. The walls themselves suggested that survival did not require stillness. It required carrying one's world along. There was also a spiritual layer. Some tribes viewed the teepee poles as the ribs of a great being, with the walls representing the earth's protective skin. To sleep inside was to rest within creation, sheltered by forces larger than oneself. You can imagine lying in that living circle, dreams shaped by sacred geometry, breath rising with smoke toward the stars. The teepee was not perfect. During severe storms, smoke flaps rattled, drafts slipped in, and sparks sometimes landed dangerously close to bedding. Families stayed alert, constantly adjusting, relying on instinct to balance airflow, fire, and hide. Yet imperfection did not equal failure. It reflected adaptation, the readiness to listen to the shelter and respond. As dawn neared, the fire dimmed, but the teepee retained warmth. You woke not stiff or frozen, but refreshed, prepared to move camp again if needed. Stepping outside, you might notice another form of shelter common in milder climates: reed huts and woven mats, breathable yet protective. They offered further proof that survival always adapted to environment and season. As you leave the teepee, frost sparkles in the air, but your imagination drifts south. Winds soften, snow thins into patches, and rivers flow freely. In these regions, warmth came not from thick hides or snow caves, but from reeds, rushes, and woven mats, shelters that allowed air to move while still guarding against chill. Archaeological evidence, limited but revealing, shows that across wetlands and coastal plains, many indigenous groups built reed huts or mat-covered lodges. The method was straightforward: harvest bulrushes, reeds, or tule plants, dry them, and weave them into wide mats. These mats were layered over pole frames, much like bark or hides in colder areas. They blocked wind and rain while permitting airflow, ideal for regions with cool but manageable winters. These mats served more than one purpose. Families laid them beneath bedding, stacked them for insulation, or rolled them into pillows. A single mat could function as floor, wall, roof, or blanket as needed. They were as adaptable as cattail fluff, yet stronger, easier to transport, and reusable over many seasons. Imagine lying on one. Your hand brushes the surface, smooth in one direction, rough in the other, with faint ridges where reeds were tied. Beneath you, the mat creaks softly against the ground. Above, more mats hang as walls, tight enough to block wind but loose enough for smoke to drift through. The air smells faintly of dried grass, sun-warmed and earthy, even in winter. Historians still debate whether reed huts were seasonal or year-round homes. Some evidence suggests coastal California and southeastern tribes lived in them continuously, replacing mats as they wore out. Others believe they were temporary shelters for hunting or fishing seasons. The question remains open, but their value is clear. Without mats, nights near rivers and lakes would have been far harsher. There are small glimpses of daily life as well. Children sometimes wrap themselves tightly in reed mats, pretending to be animals or cocoons. Early European observers described these reed burritos with amusement. Yet such play carried lessons. Handling mats taught children how to weave, repair, and respect the materials that would later keep their families warm. The soundscape inside a reed hut differs from that of a teepee or snow cave. Wind causes the mats to rustle softly, like summer leaves. Rain taps gently, absorbed by layers before dripping harmlessly away. A fire pops at the center, smoke drifting upward through small gaps. The space feels open yet secure. The hut breathes and you breathe with it. Preparing the mats required intense labor. Women harvested reeds in late summer, cutting them close to the roots, bundling them, and drying them. Later, they wove the reeds into long panels using twine from bark or fiber. Each mat needed strength to bend and flexibility to roll. Stored carefully, they could be carried by travois or boat to the next site, then unrolled and tied into place. In a few hours, a full shelter stood ready. Modern campers might recognize the ingenuity here. Woven mats are ancestors of today's roll-up sleeping pads and tarps, lightweight, versatile, easy to pack. The idea that less can be more echoes across centuries. Emotionally, reed huts offered a different comfort than hide teepees or snow shelters. They carried the memory of rivers, marshes, and open skies. Their scent recalled harvest seasons, insects humming, and warm afternoons. Sleeping inside one evoked abundance, even when frost edged the ground. The hut became a container for memory, wrapping sleepers in warmth and familiarity. There was spiritual meaning as well. In some traditions, reeds symbolized flexibility and resilience. They bent without breaking, thrived in water and air, and returned year after year. Living within reed walls reflected those same qualities: adaptability, endurance, renewal. You might imagine drifting to sleep inside such a hut, dreams shaped by the whisper of reeds reminding you to bend rather than break. Reed huts also had limits. They could not endure blizzards like snow caves or teepees. Floods damaged mats, and constant upkeep was required. But in regions without extreme cold, they offered an ideal balance of shelter and ventilation. Fortresses were unnecessary where winters were gentler. Night sounds continue in your thoughts. Frogs croaking near a marsh, owls calling overhead, mats shifting with the breeze. Inside, a family gathers. Firelight flickers across woven walls. A child coughs softly, soothed by a grandmother's touch. The hut holds them, simple, effective, carrying them into rest. As you linger, another lesson emerges. Survival was not limited to sleeping spaces. It extended to places where food was gathered. Picture hunters and fishers camped on frozen lakes, fires burning along the shore. Even while seeking food, warmth had to be created. Historical accounts show that indigenous fishers and hunters carried fire onto the ice itself. Fireside camps dotted frozen lakes, smoke rising as people tended lines and nets beneath the surface. These flames were not only for cooking. They created warm zones where bodies could recover from the cold. Imagine several small fires scattered across a lake, their light reflecting on ice like lanterns in a winter cathedral. In some regions, people built raised wooden platforms or placed flat stones beneath fires to keep the ice from melting through. Flames lit directly on ice would sink, so ingenuity required barriers, bark slabs, soil layers, even reed mats. Humans, fragile in the cold, found ways to make ice host fire. The sensory experience was intense. Fire crackled alongside the groan of shifting ice. Wind cut sharply at exposed skin, while the front of your body glowed with heat. Stiff hands eased as they reached toward the flames, steam rising from damp mittens. Around you stretched a vast white landscape under bright stars. Yet within the fire's circle, the space felt close and human. Archaeologists still debate how permanent these lakeside camps were. Some suggest families lived nearby all winter, venturing onto the ice daily. Others believe the fires marked short expeditions. Evidence remains unclear: charred stones, blackened soil along ancient shores. What is certain is the principle: fire followed food, and food often lay beneath ice. Picture the rhythm of those nights. Holes cut with bone or stone tools. Lines lowered with preserved bait. Nets set beneath the ice and carefully marked. The fire stayed alive, fed constantly, not just for warmth but to cook the catch immediately. Fresh fish sizzled on sticks, fat dripping into flames. Smoke, frost, and food blended in the air. Hunger eased. Warmth spread from within. Oral stories add small details. Children sometimes roasted bits of fish skin, crisping them until they curled. These snacks were both food and play, their crunch echoing in frozen silence. Even in harsh conditions, small comforts mattered. The textures ground the scene. Ice beneath your feet is smooth and hard. The fire burns on its platform, bark or soil steaming where heat meets cold. Your robe smells of fish oil. Your hands are slick from handling lines. The scent of food signals survival. You move closer to the fire, shoulders touching others, letting warmth settle in. Spiritual meaning surrounded these fires too. Water was sacred, home to powerful forces. Cutting through ice to draw life from below carried reverence. Fire above, water below. The elements balanced, sustaining and protecting the people. Stories shared beside those lakeside fires often reflected that balance. Fish offered as gifts, flames acting as protectors, and people standing between powerful forces. Modern parallels are easy to recognize. Ice fishers today still set up shelters on frozen lakes, carrying propane heaters or small stoves to push back the cold. Yet the core idea remains the same. Fire on ice, warmth in emptiness, survival shaped by the union of risk and creativity. Every modern fishing shack mirrors the first flames that once danced across ancient lakes. And the emotional comfort mattered just as much as the practical benefit. Sitting near a fire, you felt less vulnerable on the endless ice. Flames transformed open nothingness into a defined space, giving shape to the void. The laughter of companions, the taste of warm food, and the scent of smoke wove together into a sense of safety. You might still tremble, but despair loosened its grip. Naturally, dangers persisted. Fires burned too hot could weaken their platforms, sending sparks tumbling into icy water. Cracks sometimes rolled across the lake, quickening every heartbeat. Still, fear never fully overtook the ritual. The fire was built again, the nets were reset, and the meal prepared once more. The cold could intimidate, but it did not command. As you finish your imagined meal and settle close to the fire's fading embers, you realize that warmth itself was shaped by change. When trade introduced wool blankets, beads, and metal tools, survival evolved. Old practices blended with new materials, and winter nights were never quite the same. That story of adaptation, of trading for warmth, is what comes next. The fire on the ice dims, and you rub your hands together, letting the heat slip into memory. Turning back toward camp, you notice something different spread over sleeping families. Not only hides, reeds, or bark mats, but brightly patterned wool blankets. At first, they seem out of place in the wild. Yet they carry their own history. These were trade goods, and once they entered native camps, they permanently reshaped how people endured winter nights. One point historians generally agree on is that wool blankets arrived early during European contact, brought by traders in the 17th century and spreading quickly through trade networks across the continent. By the 18th and 19th centuries, they were widespread, commonly exchanged for furs, food, or labor. You can imagine a trader unrolling stacks of blankets in a village clearing, thick, vivid, striped in bold colors. For families used to hides heavy with smoke and animal scent, these blankets must have seemed like small wonders. There is a detail worth noting. Some of the most valued wool blankets carried patterns with meaning. The Hudson's Bay Company, for example, produced striped point blankets marked with small black lines indicating size. To Europeans, these marks were measurements. To native families, they became symbols of trade and status. Owning such a blanket was not just about staying warm, it signaled connection to a rapidly changing world. The sensory contrast stands out. Wool feels different from buffalo hide, lighter, softer, less greasy. When pulled over your shoulders, it scratches slightly, the fibers catching on skin. It smells of lanolin rather than smoke, and its bright dyes glow even in low firelight. Compared to the earthy scent of hides, wool feels almost refined. Yet beneath that comfort lies a complex story. Scholars still debate the balance between adoption and resistance. Some argue that wool blankets quickly replaced hides as preferred bedding because they were easier to carry and use. Others maintain that hides remained dominant, with blankets serving as additions rather than replacements. Archaeological finds, trader journals, and oral histories offer evidence for both views. What is clear is that blankets altered the rhythm of survival, reducing some burdens while tying communities more tightly to trade economies. Picture a winter night in a plains teepee after wool blankets had arrived. Families still slept on buffalo robes, still wrapped children in hides, but now a wool covering might lie on top, its colors flickering orange in firelight. The blanket held in the heat gathered by skins and bodies, adding another layer of comfort. For a mother tucking in her child, this combination likely felt like security doubled, traditional practices strengthened by new cloth. Early journals note something interesting. Some people cut wool blankets into strips, sewing them into clothing or decorating robes. The fabric was not limited to bedding. It became raw material used creatively. A single blanket might serve as a coat by day, a cover by night, and a ceremonial gift. Its flexibility made it more than an object. It became part of cultural expression. The soundscape of wool is subtle. Unlike hides that creak or mats that rustle, wool absorbs noise. When you move beneath it, the sound is a soft scrape, barely noticeable. Sleepers shift quietly, and the night feels calmer. The fire pops, dogs breathe heavily, but the blanket itself holds silence, wrapping you in stillness. Yet danger was woven into those colorful threads. Blankets sometimes carry disease, most notably smallpox, spread unintentionally and at times deliberately. The idea of warmth intertwined with illness is unsettling. Objects meant to preserve life also brought death. Memories of those epidemics endure in oral traditions, reminders that survival depended not only on skill and adaptation, but also on exposure to forces beyond control. Despite that shadow, blankets remained treasured. They became heirlooms passed down through generations, valued for beauty as much as warmth. Being wrapped in one meant feeling both present comfort and ancestral memory. Even today, Pendleton blankets, descendants of those early trade goods, are given at births, weddings, and ceremonies. Warmth, after all, is never purely physical. It is symbolic, shared, and lasting. Think of your own experience. Perhaps you have pulled a blanket close on a cold night, one carrying a familiar scent or reminding you of a journey. That warmth is more than heat, it is memory. In this way, the story of wool blankets is not distant. It is human and universal. You settle deeper into the imagined fabric. The scratch of wool against your skin, firelight making its colors glow brighter than they are. You feel lighter than when wrapped in hides, yet just as safe. This blend of old and new leads you to wonder how else indigenous peoples protected their bodies and spirits against winter's bite. That thought carries you forward to the herbs, poultices, and heated packs used to soothe frostbitten limbs before sleep. Medicines of warmth, that is the next lesson. The wool blanket still rests on your shoulders, its rough softness oddly comforting. But warmth alone was not always enough. The wilderness could wear at the body in ways hides and fires could not fix. Numb fingers, aching joints, skin raw from frost. That is when knowledge shifted from shelter to healing. Herbs, poultices, and heated packs became quiet remedies tucked into bedding at night, easing pain and inviting sleep back into tired limbs. Oral traditions and ethnobotanical studies show that native peoples across the continent developed a wide range of warming treatments. Cedar and pine needles were brewed into teas that spread heat through the chest, easing breathing on cold nights. Spruce resin was applied to skin to guard against windburn, its sticky layers sealing in warmth. Poultices made from bear grease or marrow, sometimes heated over the fire, were wrapped in bark or cloth and pressed against stiff muscles before rest. You imagine lying beneath hides, the faint scent of resin and smoke filling the air, the ache in your fingers slowly fading. There is another intriguing practice. Some groups used heated sand as a therapeutic pack. Sand was gathered, warmed by the fire, poured into deerskin bags, and placed on frostbitten toes or chilled stomachs. The heat spread evenly and lasted longer than that of stones. Picture holding such a pack beneath your robes at night, its steady warmth calming both body and mind. The sensations are vivid. Your skin tingles where salve has been applied. The smell of herbs lingers on your breath, and the gentle weight of a heated pack rests against your side. The cold outside feels far away now, pushed back by remedies that soften nature's harsh edges into medicine. You shift slightly, hearing the faint crackle of resin drying, and drift into deeper rest. Researchers still debate how much of this knowledge was practical versus ceremonial. Some emphasize chemical effects, cedar's antiseptic oils, pine's vitamin C, spruce resin's protective qualities. Others highlight spiritual meaning, noting that healing often included songs, prayers, or smudging. The truth likely lies in both. Science and spirit were intertwined. A poultice soothed the body, while words and rituals calmed the soul. Healing was holistic long before the term existed. Picture a winter evening in camp. A child returns from play with hands red and swollen from snow. A grandmother kneels by the fire, warming a small bundle of herbs, then gently wraps it around the fingers. She murmurs comforting words, blowing softly to cool it before pressing it close. The child curls into robes, the scent of cedar clinging like perfume. Soon sleep arrives, pain forgotten. That simple ritual carried countless generations through harsh seasons. Here is a detail that may bring a smile. Some remedies doubled as food flavorings. A tea brewed to warm the chest might also be served with dried meat, blending medicine and meal. You can imagine soft laughter as someone jokes that the healer tastes like dinner tonight. Survival was never neatly divided. Everything served more than one purpose. The soundscape of medicine is quieter than that of shelters or flames. Water bubbling in a pot, roots being ground, steam hissing as poultices lift from embers. Above it all, low voices reassure and distract from discomfort. In that setting, healing feels as emotional as it is physical. The textures linger. Resin clings to fingertips. Bark feels rough where a pack is tied. Fur presses down, sealing warmth inside. You close your eyes and feel heat spreading, not sharp like fire, but steady and calming, enough to keep fear at bay. Modern medicine reflects these practices in unexpected ways. Heating pads, vapor rubs, herbal teas, all descend from methods refined long ago. What we purchase at pharmacies today once grew in forests, gathered by people who knew which plant eased pain, which resin healed, and which herb chased cold from the bones. Emotionally, these remedies mattered deeply. Falling asleep with a warm pack on your chest, you felt not only heat but care. Someone had gathered herbs, prepared the poultice, and stayed awake to warm it for you. That closeness tied warmth directly to relationships. Healing was personal, shared, and attentive. Still, challenges existed. Some herbs burned if misused. Some packs cooled too quickly, leaving dampness that chilled instead of soothed. Knowledge grew through trial and error, and each winter brought its own risks. Over centuries, communities refined these methods, weaving them into nightly routines that made endurance possible. As you breathe in the cedar scent and let warmth sink into your bones, the wisdom becomes clear. Survival was not only about walls and fires. It required caring for the body as carefully as tending a flame. A neglected fire dies out. A neglected body weakens. Both needed attention, fuel, and watchfulness. Tomorrow you will see how even children contributed, not just by being healed, but by generating warmth themselves. Games in the snow, dances near the fire, and shared laughter kept blood moving and spirits high. In winter, warmth also came from joy. The cedar scent lingers, and the gentle heat of poultices still glows on your skin as laughter ripples through the camp. Children tumble across the snow, chasing one another in wide circles, their breath rising in white clouds. At first, it appears to be simple play, but quickly you realize it is survival too. Movement, laughter, and games weren't just entertainment in the wilderness, they were a source of warmth. Early observers noted children rolling in snow, darting between tippies, or leaping across icy streams, only to collapse in heaps of giggles. Adults watched the chaos with smiles, not only because it lifted spirits, but because it kept the children warm. A child in constant motion was less likely to shiver or stiffen in the cold. What seemed like play was actually a carefully tolerated survival method. Consider this, even on the coldest nights, some children were sent running short distances before bedtime. The purpose was simple: get their blood flowing, flush their cheeks, and ensure their bodies retained heat when they curled into hides. Imagine a mother urging her son to sprint to the nearest tree and back, legs pounding, breath ragged, before tucking him quickly between siblings so warmth radiated from his still hot skin. Play became insulation. The sensory world of these games was vivid. Snow squeaked under bare feet or soft moccasins. Shrieks echoed as children dodged each other. Dogs barked, joining the chase. Fires flickered brighter with each gust of running bodies stirring the air. When play ended, children collapsed into piles of furs, laughter fading into yawns, limbs twitching from leftover energy. Sleep came swiftly, their warmth spilling into the group. Scholars debate whether these activities were deliberate survival strategies taught by elders or instinctive exuberance guided wisely. Some accounts present them as intentional routines, almost like exercises. Others suggest adults simply allowed children's natural play to do the work. Either way, the result was the same. Movement kept the cold from taking hold during long winter nights. Play extended to adults as well. Circle dances by the fire, endurance contests, snowball skirmishes, and storytelling kept blood moving, muscles loose, and bodies warmer before sleep. You can imagine yourself stepping into a circle dance on a freezing night, swaying, stamping, breath steaming, laughter spilling. By the end, your heart races with warmth, and you collapse into bedding with heat that lingers for hours. Fur traders noted children sliding on frozen hills using flattened bark as sleds. Though the noise disturbed their sleep, the children rarely seemed cold despite light clothing. The reason was clear: joy kept them warm. You can almost hear the shrieks echo across the valley, a melody of resilience hidden in mischief. Bark sleds, snow clumps on leggings, damp hair, and hands that start icy but grow warm in the grip of a game. These were textures of survival, warmth born from energy and closeness, not just fire or hides. Spiritual teachings often reinforced this truth. Tales warned that laziness invited cold spirits, while laughter and movement kept them at bay. To sleep without play was to risk frost. To go to bed smiling was to invite dreams. These lessons embedded survival in myth, teaching children instinctively that joy itself was protection. Modern parallels exist. Children who play outdoors fall asleep faster and warmer. Doctors recommend movement to boost circulation in cold weather. Athletes train in winter to avoid hypothermia. The principle is timeless. Heat is generated, not only borrowed. Emotional comfort mattered deeply. Imagine ending a day of hardship with laughter echoing across camp. Spirits lifted, worries eased, even hunger felt lighter. Warmth became more than physical. It was joy layered over struggle, laughter woven into survival. Not all play was risk-free. Children sometimes slipped or became too sweaty, risking chill afterward. Elders intervened when necessary. Balance was essential. Too much risk turned warmth into danger. As you lie back, recalling children's laughter mixing with the fire's crackle, it becomes clear survival wasn't built solely on hides and firewood. Movement, energy, and joy were as critical. When play ended in exhaustion, stories carried warmth further. Words themselves became blankets, wrapping listeners in comfort until sleep claimed them. Historical accounts describe winter storytelling as central to indigenous life. When nights were long and food scarce, tales filled hours with purpose, entertainment, education, spiritual guidance, and psychological balm. Elders shared lessons through stories of animals teaching humans, ancestors surviving harsher winters, and tricksters whose mistakes offered caution. Each story insulated against despair. Certain stories were reserved for winter. Their power required the hush of snow, the gathering around firelight. Imagine the anticipation of a tale forbidden weeks earlier, now shared in winter's embrace. The sensory experience was vivid, fire popping, sparks rising through the smoke hole, the storyteller's voice shifting in rhythm. Children pressed close, eyes wide, faces glowing in flickering light. Adults leaned in, comforted by familiarity. Smoke thickened, hides glowed, and the night outside seemed to vanish. Scholars debate whether these tales were symbolic or literal. Likely, they were both, fact and fable intertwined. Storytelling served survival, fear melted with laughter, anxiety eased with wisdom, sleep came faster when the mind was soothed. Early visitors noted storytellers using props, shadows, and sound effects. Imagine a wolf's shadow flickering across a teepee wall as a hunt unfolds. Even in cold, you smile, drawn into imagination. The textures of this ritual linger: warmth from bodies pressed close, the rough feel of hides, the cadence of voice like a heartbeat. Stories became multi-layered experiences, emotionally healing and educational. Children learned courage, adults remembered patience, elders affirmed wisdom. Sleep came as tales closed with lingering morals. Winter dangers were woven into narratives. Frost spirits punished laziness, animals taught respect, ancestors urged vigilance. Survival instruction was coded in myth. Modern echoes are clear, bedtime stories still calm, structure, and guide. Words warm and soothe. Trickster tales provoked laughter, a survival tool in itself, sparking warmth when no fire remained. As the fire pops and stories fade, ritual song rises, a hum growing into melody, layered by voices drifting into the cold night. Songs comforted, provided rhythm and warmth. Ethnographers note songs were central to native life, not performances, but currents flowing through shelters. Voices humming in unison filled lodges with warmth, even without perfect tuning. Children added improvised beats, laughter blending into chants, creating a tender, lively soundscape. The sensory layers were rich, fire crackling, dogs sighing, song vibrating through the air, mingling with smoke and body warmth, creating a tapestry that enveloped the senses. Scholars debate ritual versus nightly use, but the outcome remained the same. Music, laughter, and storytelling sustained survival. Some anthropologists suggest that sacred songs were carefully restricted, while others note that many chants doubled as lullabies or work rhythms. Evidence indicates a spectrum. Songs moved fluidly between ceremonial importance and simple comfort. Their effect is undisputed. Songs soothed, steadied, and warmed. Picture a winter evening inside a bark lodge. The wind rattles the walls. Snow creeps in at the edges. A mother begins humming softly, rocking a child. The melody drifts outward, and soon another voice joins, then another. Before long, the entire family hums together, not loudly, but insistently, as if weaving sound into insulation. The cold stays outside. Inside, harmony holds the night. Oral stories preserve a curious detail. Some hunters claimed songs made fires burn longer. Whether true or coincidental, the belief endured that music itself nourished flames, keeping embers alive as long as voices continued. Imagine sitting awake, too tired to gather more wood, singing into the dark and watching coals glow stubbornly, as if listening. The tactile world of music differs from hides or stones. It vibrates in your bones, tickles the chest, resonates in the skull. You feel the song as much as you hear it. Curling beneath covers, the pulse of a nearby drum feels like a second heartbeat, steadying your own. This alignment of body and rhythm guided countless sleepers into dreamland. Songs offered more than comfort. They carried identity. Verses reminded people of who they were, where they came from, which spirits watched over them. Falling asleep to such a chant meant drifting into dreams not as an isolated body, but as part of a community stretching across generations. Belonging itself was warmth. Modern echoes remain. Parents still sing lullabies, not for musical skill but for calm. People hum while walking through cold streets, finding rhythm to distract from numbness. Today, we slip on earbuds and let music carry us through dark nights. The principle is the same. Sound warms what fire cannot reach. Not every song lulled. Some stirred energy, chants before hunts, dances performed even in snow. These quickened blood, lifted spirits, and prevented lethargy. Warmth is not always quiet. Sometimes it is loud, pulsing, insistent. Imagine stamping feet to a drum, breath steaming, body flushed. By the time the chant fades, your heart burns hot and you collapse onto hide, radiating heat from within. Curling beneath covers, the imagined song still echoes. Voices blend into one low hum, becoming a lullaby. The night outside rages cold, but inside you are wrapped in sound, safe in a cocoon of music. Tomorrow you realize warmth also comes from vigilance, ritual checks, nightly stirring, adjusting, and watching. Survival was never a single act. It was a choreography repeated until spring returned. The final note lingers as silence settles, but the night is not unattended. Fires need tending, hides adjusting, sleepers checking. Survival in the wilderness was not brilliance in one moment, but repeated nightly habits. These routines, quiet and deliberate, kept families alive when the cold pressed hardest. Accounts from explorers and missionaries describe adults rising at intervals to stir embers. Even off patrol, someone would shuffle from bedding, crouch by the hearth, poke coals back to life, add a log, and slip under hides again. This rhythm, wake, tend, sleep, gave the night a heartbeat. Imagine lying half asleep, hearing the scrape of a stick in ash, and drifting again, reassured the fire will not die. Oral histories note families developed signals to share duty. A cough, a tap, a whispered name. An elder nudges a nephew, murmuring, "Your turn," before rolling back into slumber. Duty was shared quietly, without drama, but each act preserved life. The sensory experience is subtle but constant. Embers hiss, hides shift, stones clink around the fire pit, and silence resumes, broken only by snores and wind. This cycle repeats for hours, a rhythm as natural as breath. Researchers debate whether routines were strictly structured or varied by tribe. Some evidence points to formal rotations, like ship watches. Other sources suggest flexibility, lighter sleepers taking more responsibility. The ambiguity highlights adaptability, structure where necessary, fluidity where possible. A whimsical note: children sometimes pretended to participate. Too small for firewood, but so did learning. Through play, they absorbed nightly rituals that would one day rest entirely on their shoulders. Tactile details matter. Your hand grips a half-charred log, rough and warm at one end, icy at the other. Sparks nip your skin as you place it. The fire catches with a sigh. Smoke smells cling to your fingers. Your robe absorbs heat as you slip back under it. Each small act leaves proof that duty is fulfilled. Bedding, too, demanded attention. Hides shift overnight, letting drafts creep in. Elders check edges, tucking under children, pulling corners close to block cold, like sealing cracks in a dam. Cold tries to seep through, people patch. These small, repetitive gestures make the difference between warmth and frostbite. Tools and weapons require attention. Hunters ensured bows and spears lay within reach for defense and morning hunts. Nightly checks did more than comfort, they prepared the camp for dawn. To neglect them was to risk waking unready. Sometimes, spirits were invoked. Whispered prayers accompanied logs, thanking the fire for holding strong. Adjusting hides might include blessings for sleeping children. These were quiet fusions of work and faith, survival made sacred in small motions. Modern households echo fragments of this. Checking thermostats, ensuring the stove is off, doors locked, blankets pulled snug. We no longer fight the wilderness directly, yet nightly vigilance retains the imprint of generations. Emotionally, these routines reassured. Stirring fire or adjusting bedding whispered, "You are watched over," allowing deeper, peaceful sleep. Mishaps occurred. Fires flared, logs cracked, covers pulled away. Mistakes were tolerated. What mattered was continuity, the dance of night repeated until spring. Curling under your imagined robe, hearing the scrape of someone tending fire, you know duty has passed. Trust itself is warmth. Survival was steady, habitual, shared. Not all warmth came from embers or hides. Some came from food, heavy winter meals that stoked inner fires, carrying heat into the bloodstream. Eating warmed from within. This was your next discovery. The fire tended, hides pulled tight, children tucked, the camp momentarily still. Then a scent drifts across the lodge, rich, savory, heavy with fat. Warmth came from meals prepared to sustain bodies through long cold nights. Eating built an internal hearth, burning after the outer fire dimmed. Historical records show winter diets relied on fat and protein. Buffalo marrow roasted in bones, dried salmon in broth, meat simmered with herbs. These were necessities. Fat was prized as fuel for the body's furnace. Imagine sitting cross-legged by the fire, clutching a bowl of marrow-thick stew, feeling warmth spread outward into chilled hands and feet. Pemmican, a mix of dried meat, fat, and berries, served as travel rations and nightly staples, sustaining hunters and children alike. Unwrapping a pouch under hides, chewing slowly, the fat melts, waves of warmth coursing through veins. Survival never tasted subtle. The lodge is alive with sensory detail. Pot bubbles softly, steam carries roasted meat and herb aromas. Wooden spoon scalds lips but soothes throat. Fat clings to fingers. Welcome, as every drop adds warmth. Waste was not an option. Researchers debate meal timing. Heavy meals just before sleep, or rationed throughout the day. Consensus remains, fatty foods, marrow, pemmican, acted almost like medicine against winter's bite. Oral histories reveal children begged for crackling fat, dubbed fire food, igniting warmth within, cheeks glowing, laughter bright. Textures matter, marrow steaming from split bones, dried venison softened in broth, wrinkled berries bursting tart against fat. Each bite heavier than its weight, carrying a promise, you will survive this night. Spiritual meaning infused food. Animals were thanked before meals, small offerings tossed into the fire, a symbolic feeding of the flame. Eating, like tending fire, was relational, a covenant between humans, animals, and earth. Modern science echoes this. High-fat diets produce warmth by fueling metabolism, and eating before sleep prevents night chills. The logic behind indigenous meals aligns surprisingly well with modern thermodynamics, though it relied entirely on experience, not formulas or textbooks. Emotional comfort mattered as much as calories. Picture yourself after a hearty stew, your stomach content, body relaxed, breath deepening as drowsiness creeps in. Warmth spreads not just from the fire, but from within, and sleep comes easier. Hunger sharpens the cold, but fullness softens it. A well-fed camp was a warm camp. Yet, survival was never guaranteed. Food could spoil, stores could dwindle, hunts might fail. Entire winters hinged on preparation, whether enough fat was rendered, meat dried, or berries stored. Nights of plenty brought laughter. Nights of scarcity meant thin broth and the constant presence of hunger. Still, ingenuity prevailed. Families stretched resources, thickening stews with roots or bark, rationing meat, sometimes letting the youngest eat first. Travelers' journals note a curious practice. Some families kept heated stones in cooking pots overnight, not only to rewarm food, but to prevent the pot from freezing. By morning, the stew remained edible, needing only a stir before serving. Imagine waking to steam rising from a still warm pot, breakfast already waiting. As you tuck back beneath hides, belly full from this imagined meal, you sense how deeply food intertwined with rest. The fire glows outside, the stew glows within, and together they fend off frost. Sleep arrives not with shivers, but with contentment. Nourishment brings its own warmth. But survival went beyond food. Often, the greatest heat came from ceremony, dances, rituals, and communal gatherings that lifted spirits and reminded everyone they belonged to something larger than winter. Here, the warmth of shared ritual becomes evident. Firelight reflected not just on hides, but in the hearts of the people. Your belly still full, the taste of marrow and berries lingers as the fire dims. The drum begins, slow and steady, a second heartbeat inside the lodge. It's time not for hunting or storytelling, but for ceremony. In winter, when nights were longest, rituals acted as another form of insulation. They warmed the body through movement and the spirit through community. Historians note that many native nations treated winter months as a season of ceremony, travel limited, hunts shorter, evenings filled with dances, prayers, and communal rites. These were not distractions, they were anchors. Rituals structured the cold, gave meaning to hardship, and turned long nights into occasions of strength. Imagine sitting in a circle, the drum pulsing, bodies moving in rhythm, firelight reflecting on painted faces. Cold air seeps through lodge cracks, but you barely notice. The energy of ceremony warms more than any robe. Certain winter dances were designed to keep blood flowing, feet stamping, arms circling with the drum. Devotion and physiology intertwined, survival became celebration. Your heartbeat quickens, breath puffs in the air, chest glowing with heat. The sensory experience is layered. Drums boom, rattles shake, voices chant, smoke rises with the scent of cedar and sage. The ground trembles faintly beneath moving feet, mats creak, children giggle and fall into rhythm, dogs bark excitedly. Every sense is engaged, the cold is forgotten. Scholars debate the purpose of such ceremonies. Some argue they were spiritual, honoring spirits of winter, calling protection from frost and famine. Others emphasize practical benefits, movement, bonding, morale. The truth is likely both. Ritual blurred the line between necessity and faith, making survival itself sacred. Early explorers tried to join, clumsy in heavy boots, yet afterward reported feeling warmer than in days. Ritual carried both spiritual and physical reward. The tactile sensations draw you in. Your palm presses the drum, vibrations ripple through your bones. Feet strike the earth, warmth surging with blood. Sweat beads on your brow despite frost creeping around the lodge. When the dance ends, you collapse on hides, muscles burning, lungs full, body radiating heat. Emotional warmth lingers. Ceremony reminds each person they are not alone. Drums beat as shared hearts, chants as shared breaths. Loneliness, dangerous in winter, dissolves into unity. Some traditions honored animal spirits guiding hunters, others called upon ancestors to watch over sleepers. Pre-bed chants thanked the moon or fire. These were practical conversations with the elements sustaining life. Modern parallels exist. Winter festivals, midnight masses, carols by firelight, all aim to warm hearts during dark months. Ritual creates warmth where the world withholds it. Ceremonies carried risks. Fires burned faster, wood consumed, hunters exhausted. But these were willingly paid. Without ritual, spirits dimmed, and survival faltered. Better to burn extra wood, expend energy, than let despair freeze hearts. Now, wrapped again in hides after ceremony, your chest still glows, ears ring with drums, mind humming. The camp breathes as one. Bodies sink into rest, dreams stitched with ritual rhythm. But dawn brings the next lesson. Survival requires preparation. Gathering wood, mending robes, checking shelters. Maintenance never ends. Warmth at night depends on work by day. Historical accounts describe winter days spent gathering fuel. Men and women scouted for branches, cut deadwood, hauled logs. Without supply, fires dwindled, frost crept in. Picture trudging through knee-deep snow, dragging a heavy branch, breath ragged, fingers numb. Each exhausting step ensures another hour of warmth. Wood was stored carefully against shelters, snow insulating rather than burying it. Families marked caches with branches or stones. A tidy pile was more than organization, it was life insurance. Mittens scrape bark, logs dig into shoulders, resin clinging sharp and sticky. Even before burning, wood leaves its imprint, a reminder of labor demanded. Division of labor varied. Some accounts suggest men cut wood while women carried and stored. Others emphasize shared responsibility. Survival bent roles as needed. Warmth required more than firewood, robes had to be maintained. Hides stiffened, tore, wore thin. Women softened them with tools, rubbed fat, patched holes. Kneeling by the fire, scraping stiff hides, the sound like sandpaper, robes became supple again, ready to shield another night. Children had chores too, such as shaking out bedding each morning to clear frost. Imagine them grumbling, robes flapping, ice scattering like tiny stars, a necessary task disguised as play. Daily preparation created a bustling soundscape. Axes thudded, sleds creaked, scrapers rasped, fires roared, pots refilled. Every motion pointed toward one goal: survive tonight, tomorrow, and the day after. Food preparation dominated daylight. Meat dried, fat rendered, berries mixed. Every bite at night had been earned in the cold day. Day's work and night's rest were inseparable. Modern parallels exist. You may not chop wood, but check thermostats, stack blankets, or fill freezers. Comfort at night still depends on diligence by day. Preparation brought emotional warmth. Seeing stacked wood, repaired hides, and secured food eased fear. Confidence became a blanket. Yet work never ended. Snowstorms could bury wood, predators raid food, hides tear. Preparation was fragile, under constant threat. Adaptation was constant. Lost wood replaced, torn robes mended, spoiled food shared. Effort and renewal were endless, but so was resilience. Fur traders noted how indigenous families could strike camp, move, and rebuild in a single day. Preparation wasn't hoarded, it was portable. Warmth traveled with you. Lie back now, after a long day of work. Muscles ache, hands smell of resin, robe heavy but repaired. You sigh into bedding, grateful not only for warmth, but for knowing tomorrow you can do it again. Another layer of survival awaits. Sometimes warmth came not from fire or hides, but from the animals themselves, fur, feather, and skin transformed into garments that cling like second flesh. The ache in your shoulders lingers, but your mind drifts to the garments you wear, the protection they provide. No matter how bright the fire burned, or how thick the bedding was, survival in the wilderness depended on what touched your skin. Clothing wasn't decoration, it was armor against frost. Carefully crafted from animals who had already provided food and tools, these garments were essential. Without fur, feathers, and hides, the night could be merciless. Ethnographic records show the incredible variety of winter clothing made by native peoples across North America. In the subarctic, caribou hides were standard, prized for hollow hairs that trapped air and provided unmatched insulation. On the plains, buffalo robes draped over shoulders like heavy blankets, yet flexible enough to move in. In the Great Lakes and Northeast, deer hides lined with fur kept hunters both warm and agile. Imagine yourself wrapped in these layers, each garment a story of labor, skill, and survival. Here's a fascinating detail. Caribou fur insulates so well that modern studies show it outperforms many synthetic fabrics. Its hollow hairs function like down, holding heat while remaining lightweight. Indigenous seamstresses understood this long before thermometers existed. They layered furs strategically, creating garments warmer than any wool blanket. The sensory world of clothing was intimate. Running your hand over a buffalo robe, you feel the thick, musky texture, faintly greasy with tallow used to preserve it. Moccasins lined with rabbit fur are soft, tickling your toes. A hood edged with wolf hair brushes your cheeks, stiff guard hairs breaking icy winds before they reach skin. Smoke clings to every item, both preservative and perfume, the universal scent of survival. Scholars still debate the balance of practicality and artistry in winter clothing. Some argue beadwork, quill patterns, and dyed fringes were indulgent in harsh weather. Others say the artistry offered spiritual warmth, transforming hides into symbols of identity and dignity. Surviving garments show the truth. Clothing could be both functional and breathtakingly beautiful. Warmth wasn't just physical, it was cultural, emotional, symbolic. Picture a night in camp. Families check their clothing before bedding down. Moccasins dry by the fire to prevent stiffness. Robes are shaken free of snow, then used as blankets. Fur-filled mittens are tucked close to stay warm. Every item is treasured, because each could mean the difference between waking alive or not. A quirky note from travelers' journals: some hunters slept with boots tucked under their arms or inside robes, not to prevent theft, but because frozen boots were impossible to wear in the morning. Imagine a man curled awkwardly, moccasins pressed to his chest like children, grumbling in sleep, yet saving himself hours of discomfort. The textures of these garments linger in the mind: the rough tanned hide, stiff but durable; the plush inner fur, soft and clinging; the swish of fringes, even the creak of sinew stitches tightened by cold. Wrapped in layers, you feel swaddled, heavy but secure, as if the wilderness itself lent part of its skin to you. Clothing had a spiritual dimension. Wearing an animal's hide meant sharing its power. A buffalo robe carried the herd's strength. A caribou parka carried its agility. Clothing was transformation, not theft, borrowing resilience from creatures already adapted to survive winter. To sleep in these garments was to lie within a covenant of shared life. Modern parallels exist. Downlined parkas, faux fur trim, insulated boots, they all trace back to these primal designs. Factories mimic what indigenous hands stitched with bone needles and sinew thread. The principle is the same: cover the body with what nature perfected. The emotional comfort of clothing was undeniable. A hunter away from camp could wrap a buffalo robe tightly, curl into snow, and survive. Clothing wasn't accessory, it was portable shelter. Garments demanded care. Hides stiffened if not smoked properly, fur shed if dampened too long. Women scraped, softened, and treated each piece tirelessly. Children learned to grease moccasins and patch tears. Clothing, like fire, was never finished. It was a living task. Now, imagine yourself swaddled in layers: soft moccasins, thick mittens, a heavy robe, snug hood. The fire burns low, yet you feel secure. Cold presses against your shelter but cannot pierce the animal skins surrounding you. You are no longer bare human flesh. You are a creature of fur and hide, resilient against the frost. Beyond individual clothing, entire communities transformed winter into a time of gathering. Large lodges, communal houses, winter villages, warmth multiplied when dozens slept together. Fires burned long, walls thick with tradition and resilience. The buffalo robe on your shoulders grows heavier as sleep nears, but distant voices keep you alert. Now step outside in your imagination. Before you stretches not scattered teepees or lone fires, but a massive structure against the snow. Smoke rises along its roof. This is a community home: longhouses, earth lodges, cedar plank houses, built for endurance. Wherever winters demanded strength, people built collectively, knowing many fires burned warmer than one. Here's a detail to savor: some earth lodges had central fires while smaller hearths dotted the floor. Each family tended its own fire but benefited from all. Imagine lying there, the air smoky, warmth rolling from dozens of flames. Your body rests inside a network of fires, like threads in a vast blanket. The sensory world is rich: wood smoke, meat grease, drying hides, stored berries, distant voices, laughter here, a lullaby there, a cough in the corner. Floors layered with mats and furs soften the earth. Heat is uneven but never freezing. Shifting under your robe, you are reassured by the volume of life around you. Researchers still debate whether communal lodges were practical, symbolic, or both. Large groups could gather food and fuel more efficiently. Spiritually, the longhouse represented an ancestor, the earth lodge a womb. Both are true. Sleeping here means being held by walls, kinship, history, and myth. A note from oral stories: children complained about snoring elders, crying babies, and whispered gossip. Yet, grown, they recalled the longhouse as the warmest place they ever slept. Noise was a small price for heat and safety. Textures linger: cedar planks, rough but solid; reed mats, cool yet softer than bare earth; robes pulled tighter as warmth from neighbors brushes against you. Communal living erases loneliness. You never face the cold alone. Shared bodies, shared fire, shared survival. Modern echoes are everywhere: heated apartment buildings, dormitories, holiday gatherings. The principle endures: many bodies, one warmth. Challenges existed: smoke, disease, arguments, but the benefits outweighed the discomfort. Communities that slept together survived. Close your eyes. Imagine drifting in such a lodge. Voices murmur like waves, fires crackle softly, walls hold firm against wind. You feel the weight of others nearby, the rhythm of overlapping dreams. Cold exists outside, but you are wrapped in centuries of wisdom. Bodies, animals, and land intertwined. Breathing slow and steady, you surrender to the warmth of body and spirit. Outside, the wilderness is cold, but inside, you are swaddled, alive, and secure. Survival has always been communal, layered, and deliberate. You drift into sleep, carried by the fires, hides, and hearts of those who endured before.